Remember the Neanderthals? Our superstar humanoid cousins of the Pleistocene era in all their wide-nosed and slope-foreheaded glory? They roamed through Europe and Asia for over 350,000 years before they vanished. This was around the same time our ancestors, the Homo sapiens, decided to take a vacation from Africa and explore the world. We may never know what truly happened to the Neanderthals and why they didn't make it to the present times, but thanks to some hefty archaeological digging and impressive fossil finds, we now know a bit more about them. One theory for their disappearance is that the climate wasn't suitable for them anymore. Supporters of this idea think Mother Nature turned on the Neanderthals and sent them packing. Unfortunately, if we look at Neanderthal archaeological sites in Italy, for example, there are no signs of weather catastrophes that could have wiped out this entire species. Others believe there was a bit of resource competition between Neanderthals and humans. That's why specialists also dug around several other archaeological sites where Neanderthals and sapiens might have rubbed elbows for about 3,000 years. In this case, it does seem that the Neanderthals were a bit behind with their tools. Their technology was like flip phones in the age of VR. But who knows if these two species ever crossed paths in that particular region? The evidence is still fuzzy. How they went extinct isn't the only information we're curious about when it comes to Neanderthals. Other scientists, for instance, are trying to decode some of the Neanderthal molecular barcodes to identify their specific traits, some of which you might share, believe it or not. Sure, Neanderthals as a whole species did, in fact, go extinct. But that's not to say remnants of their DNA can't be found in humans. Now, you know how things go when folks live near each other. Some genetic mixing was bound to happen. The evidence? A dash of Neanderthal DNA which was found in modern folks. Now, this is where the plot thickens. Scientists thought that since Neanderthals never lived in Africa, their DNA wouldn't be found in modern African populations. Well, it turns out that African people have about 0.5% Neanderthal DNA too. This doesn't mean our Neanderthal relatives simply teleported through African territories without leaving any trace behind. What this discovery actually implies is that early humans might have visited Europe, mixed their genetic material with that of Neanderthals, after which they returned to Africa. That's a lot of migration. How did we stumble upon that Neanderthal DNA these days, you might wonder? Well, scientists gathered thousands of people from all around the world. Participants came from places like East Asia, Europe, South Asia, America, and Africa. Percentages may vary, sure, but around 20% of the good old Neanderthal DNA is still found in US modern folks. Sure, the average Joe only carries about 2% of that caveman swagger. If you're from certain places or families that have a smidge more Neanderthal in their gene soup, you're looking at 3% tops. Is there anything in particular that we share with our long-gone humanoid cousins? As it turns out, our Neanderthal ancestors gifted us more than just their company for some thousands of years. They also passed down the incredible legacy of their noses. Well, you see, the Neanderthals were outfitted with some seriously high-rising sniffers. These weren't just cosmetic, they were also quite the asset in chilly climates. The icicle-dripping, teeth-chattering kind of cold where your breath could freeze before it leaves your lips. During those days, the Neanderthal noses worked as personal heaters, warming and humidifying the cold, dry air they inhaled. For that kind of extreme weather, these impressive nasal skyscrapers turned out to be quite handy. When our Homo sapiens ancestors decided to leave the sunny savannas of Africa for a spot of frostbite up in Eurasia, they bumped into the Neanderthals. This encounter resulted in not just an exchange of pleasantries, but also an exchange of genes that coded for larger noses. This newfound genetic nugget was discovered by scientists who dug deep into the DNA of over 6,000 volunteers. To complete the study, these scientists meticulously compared this genetic data to snapshots of the volunteers' faces. They measured the distances between various points on each face, such as the height of the volunteers' nose bridges. They then played a game of spot the genetic marker to identify if certain facial traits were linked with specific genes. By the end of this exciting chase, they hit the jackpot. 33 shiny new genome areas were linked to facial features. One standout gene, named ATF3, was traced back to our Neanderthal ancestors and seemed to be the maestro of controlling nose height. Participants with Native American ancestry had Neanderthal hand-me-downs in this gene, contributing to their taller noses. Think of the ATF3 gene as a Neanderthal housewarming gift to us humans as we stepped into colder climates from Africa. Interestingly, this isn't the first time our ancestors have played pass the gene. Back in 2021, the same research team uncovered a gene influencing lip shape called TBX15. This gene was a little love note from the Denisovans, another set of our ancient relatives, who lived in Asia and went extinct around 30,000 years ago. Another part of the scientific community believes our Neanderthal buddies had this weird genetic feature when it came to their brains. Is that why they didn't make it? Through this theory, it was suggested that US humans might owe our brainy edge to a quirky gene mutation. This mutation gave our neocortex, that's the smarty pants part of the brain, a little population boom in the neuron department. This amazing gene of ours isn't all that different from the Neanderthal version. It's just one amino acid off. Just like ordering a coffee with one sugar instead of none. This tiny tweak is found in virtually all modern humans. Meanwhile, our extinct relatives, the Neanderthals, Denisovans, and other primate pals, all missed the mutation memo, at least according to the study. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Just because we have more neurons doesn't necessarily mean we're geniuses by comparison. But these results do suggest that we might have rewired the brain in a way that gave us a cognitive leg up. Also, it's not all about this lone amino acid difference. It's just a piece of the puzzle. Scientists have previously found a whopping 96 differences between our DNA and that of Neanderthals that could have potentially affected our different outcomes as species. Studying Neanderthal DNA also gave us some insight into their relationships. In fact, we now have some solid evidence of what a Neanderthal family looked like. And surprisingly, it's not really that different from ours. For this study, researchers gathered information from a Neanderthal archaeological site located in Asia. They discovered that one particular family included a doting Neanderthal dad, his teen daughter, and a sprightly young lad who was possibly their nephew or cousin. Part of the group was also an older female relative, maybe an aunt or granny. Now, our young damsel would eventually pack her bags, wave a teary goodbye, and leave her papa's home when she found Mr. Right. Had she been a boy like her young cousin, she would have been a happy homebody. But worry not, she wasn't stepping into a world of strangers. Her new community likely had some familiar, friendly faces. But how were scientists able to predict the ending of this story? By browsing through their gene pool, researchers were able to figure out that the Neanderthal social structure was patrilical. What this means is that most female Neanderthals left their homes when choosing a partner and started a new life with another family. The same research shows that our cave-dwelling clans likely weren't living in isolation either. Families living close by were probably visiting the same rock sampling areas to make their stone tools, the equivalent of a neighborhood hardware store. And when they weren't tooling around, they were busy hunting delicious meals like ibex, horses, bison, and other wandering critters. Scientists, however, were careful to add that this ancient family portrait might not represent the full spectrum of Neanderthal social life. They've kindly asked future archaeologists to get more Neanderthal DNAs on the Ancestry websites. At some point in its long and very interesting history, our dear planet Earth was sort of snoozing, just doing its planetary thing, spinning around the sun. And then, bam, life starts getting fancy. Plants and animals start strutting their stuff, showing off their complexity. Fast forward a bit. About 65 million years ago to be exact. And a cosmic disaster strikes. Or at least that's what we presume. An asteroid probably smashed into Earth, wiping out the dinosaurs and other big animals. We can't pinpoint specifics about the asteroid. But we do know that it was extremely large and it crashed into our precious planet, creating a dusty mess that settled everywhere. You can still find remnants of that dust layer in sedimentary rocks today. If you dig beneath it, you'll uncover a whole bunch of fossils. These prehistoric creatures were living it up before the asteroid crashed the party. Think of it as the planet going on a cleaning spree, leaving a bunch of empty spaces waiting to be filled. And guess who took the opportunity? Mammals! These furry little critters were the ones to rise to fame. But why is it that this disaster became such a great opportunity for mammals? It's pretty simple, actually. With no big bullies around, they grew, multiplied, and had a population expanse. All kinds of mammals joined to fill in the blanks. Primates, rodents basically, the whole furry gang. We're talking about placental mammals, marsupials, and even egg-laying mammals, adding some serious variety to the mix. We like to think of primates as our closest relatives here on Earth. What's their story? Well, around 63 million years ago, just a couple of million years after the dinosaurs' final dance, the primates decided it was time for a family reunion. They split into two groups, the dry-nosed primates, who became the cool monkeys and apes we know today, and the wet-nosed primates, who went off to become lemurs and aye-ayes, hey-hays. The fun didn't stop there. About 58 million years ago, the dry-nosed primates began their own little mission. One special guest called the tarsier, arrived on the scene, featuring big eyes that were perfect for late-night shenanigans. This tarsier took a different path from its primate relatives, embracing its unique niche and evolving separately. To this day, the tarsier is the only primate that feeds exclusively on meat. These little guys have a taste for insects, small birds, rodents, and even lizards. But that's not all that makes them unique. Their eyes are twice the size of their brains. Also, their heads can do a full 180-degree spin, just like an owl. Because of their features, the tarsiers are the true kings and queens of the night. With their superpower of ultrasonic tracking, they can spot their prey instantly. Plus, their legs and feet are like springs ready to launch them into action. They've got this special ankle bone called the tarsus, which gives them those epic leaping skills. Hence the name, if you were wondering. But let's leave these little critters to rest and get back to our story, shall we? About 55 million years ago, the Earth cranked up the heat, literally. This sudden hot pod was a bit too much for many deep ocean dwellers and plants to handle, and they bid their farewells. But hey, every goodbye is an opportunity for something new, right? The oceanic mammals known as cetaceans, saw their chance and took it. They splashed into those empty niches, becoming the rulers of the sea. In this category of creatures, you can find the blue whale and the dolphin. A special primate guest made an appearance around 47 million years ago. Scientists now affectionately call the fossil of such a creature Ida. This little wonder caused quite a stir, initially hailed as the missing link in human evolution. But here's the hilarious part. It turned out Ida was not one of us dry-nosed primates, but a cheeky wet-nosed one. Moving forward to 40 million years ago, this is when another big event happened in the primate world. The New World monkeys, our distant cousins, decided to take a different path and branch off from our lineage of Old World monkeys. They packed their bags and set off to conquer South America, where they're still living it up today. What's the difference between the two, you might ask? Well, one crucial thing that sets them apart is the fact that the Old World monkeys had nostrils that pointed downwards. Around 25 million years ago, another troop of apes entered the scene, and these guys had something special, the lack of a tail. These unique creatures would go on to become our closest relatives. We're talking apes and great apes, the cool gang who share a whole lot of genetic similarities with us. The first ape to break free from the monkey madness was the gibbon. About 18 million years ago is when this little acrobat swung into the picture. A few million years later, the great apes made their grand entrance too. Orangutans were the pioneers, venturing into the wilds of southern Asia. We're getting closer and closer to the present. It was 7 million years ago when the great apes took a major fork in the evolutionary road. One path led to our ancestors, the future Homo sapiens, and the other path led to chimpanzees and bonobos. These two primate branches remained united for a few million years before finally going their separate ways. 5.6 million years ago, a game-changing ape called Ardipithecus made its way into our evolutionary history. It had a special talent, bipedalism. That's right, this was one of the first apes to walk on 2 feet, probably making its primate buddies raise an eyebrow or two. The real showstoppers, however, arrived around 4 million years ago, the Australopithecus crew. These were the earliest members of the Hominin subtribe, our tribe. What made them so special? Well, probably the fact that they brought some serious tools to the game. Stone tools, to be precise. It seems that at some point in their evolution, these clever primates started using stones to make their lives easier. Now here comes a crucial turning point in our story. About 2 million years ago, our ancestors faced a food shortage. Survival of the fittest was the name of the game, and two strategies emerged. Group 1 went for stronger jaws, allowing them to chomp on tough foods like nuts. Group 2 had a different idea. They opted for weaker jaws, but bigger brains. They wanted access to a wider range of food options. Obviously, the bigger-brained group took the prize. And here's where our gang comes into play. Around 2.5 million years ago, a type of primate also known as handyman made its mark on history. These clever beings had larger brains and knew how to put those neurons to good use. About 1.9 million years ago, a new star emerged, Homo erectus. These creatures not only walked upright, but also had brains that were almost twice the size of the handyman's. They took the world by surprise, becoming the first of our direct ancestors to venture out of the African continent. They even knew how to tame fire. Approximately 700,000 years ago, the world witnessed a culinary revolution. The earliest evidence of cooking appeared. And around 500,000 years ago, our ancestors decided it was time to become a bit more fashionable, donning the first evidence of clothing. Our very own species came to be just 300,000 years ago. Told you we were late to the party. But the world was never the same after the appearance of Homo sapiens, the anatomically modern humans. Alongside our other relatives, we emerged, ready to conquer the world with our innovative minds and complex societies. The exact path of our evolution remains a bit of a mystery. But what we do know for sure is that Neanderthals joined the party around at some point too. As Homo sapiens flourished, so did our capacity for language. Modern speech is believed to have emerged almost hand in hand with our species. We started expressing ourselves, sharing stories, and shaping the world with our words. So, there you have it. It took 13.8 billion years of cosmic history for humans to make their entrance. Think about it. 99.998% of the time since the Big Bang, we weren't even around. Our species, Homo sapiens, is the toddler of the Earth's family, existing for just the tiniest fraction of the universe's timeline. Yet, in this blink of an eye, we've managed to unravel the entire story that led to our existence. The story won't end with us. It's an ongoing saga, still being written with every passing moment.
Dinosaurs are some of the most fascinating creatures to have ever walked Earth. It's a shame that we won't be able to have Jurassic Park, where we can see some of the coolest creatures come to life. But we are actually living with some creatures that are just as old as dinosaurs, such as crocodiles and sharks. They haven't changed much since they appeared millions of years ago. But most dinos didn't make it when the asteroid struck Earth. In a way, the asteroid was a giant reset button for the planet. After hitting Earth, this space traveler wiped out almost every living thing. The sky was covered with ash, which blocked out sun rays. That meant that plants couldn't grow, and this made a lot of herbivores, really hungry. As a result, they had to change their diet and adapt to the new changes. This forced some of those dinosaurs to take on a new path in life, turning into some modern animals we know today. If the asteroid had changed its course just a bit, then dinosaurs would have remained the dominant species. So, what would have happened if dinosaurs had stuck around? Well, first of all, evolution would have played out differently for them. Maybe during those millions of years, humans would not have evolved to be on top of the food chain. Imagine a world where dinosaurs still existed today. If dinosaurs had evolved as humans did, then we'd have to compete with them. There were multiple species of humans, But Homo sapiens, also known as us, prevailed. A humanoid dino, or dinoid, would be something strange. First of all, they would look different, more reptilian than us. Our brain sizes would differ, and they would be physically bigger and stronger. Putting a human and a dinoid side by side would be interesting. First of all, dinoids would have scales as opposed to human skin, and their teeth would be sharper. They would probably not have 5 fingers on each hand, and their nails would be sharp claws. Also, we don't know what they would sound like, but they'd possibly be guttural like crocodiles. Dinosaurs had very good vision compared to mammals, so it's possible we'd see dinoids with large eyes. The population of Earth has reached a staggering 8 billion people, and we've changed our environment to suit our needs. With that said, if dinoids were the dominant creatures, then the environment would be suited for them. Speaking of physical features, scientists predicted what dinoids would look like if they had evolved into intelligent creatures that walked upright and had opposable thumbs. These wiggly thumbs are important for evolution, since they helped humans start using tools for defending themselves and hunting. The creature may not look like the ideal reptile, and its appearance might not be flattering. But if dinosaurs had evolved, then these creatures could be your classmate or colleague at work. Not all dinosaurs were alike, as their fossils have shown. Some were gigantic, while others resembled any modern-day animal. The biggest land-walking dinosaur was the titanosaur, although the measurements are only rough estimates based on fossilized bones. It's estimated that the dino was around 122 feet long and lived between 100 to 95 million years ago. It was so massive that its weight was equivalent to 18 modern-day elephants. There were dinosaurs all over the world in different time eras, climates, and landscapes. However, only a handful were known as giants. But though they excelled in body size, they lacked in brain size. Some of the most well-known dinosaurs, like the Allosaurus and Stegosaurus, had very small brains, like me, which means it would have been nearly impossible for them to properly evolve into intelligent beings. Tell me about it. But in the late Cretaceous period, the T-Rex roamed the land. It had larger brains than its Allosaurus counterparts, which were millions of years behind. Even so, the T-Rex's brain only weighed just under a pound. A human brain is nearly 3 pounds. It might have been cool to see a T-Rex evolve into an intelligent being with opposable thumbs on its tiny stick hands. Contrary to popular belief, the T-Rex was actually quite slow, and a human could have easily outrun it. So, we know that these days, they wouldn't belong in any competitive sports that involve running. We know that dinosaurs could be herbivores and carnivores. But throughout their evolution, one thing remained the same: they had small brains. Other forms of dinosaurs were around too, such as long-legged and horned dinosaurs. Either way, they were on top of the food chain even when little mammals had cameo appearances. We have to consider that when the asteroid struck and wiped out dinosaurs, mammals took over the scene. If dinosaurs and mammals had shared the dominant position in the food chain and had followed a similar path in their evolution, then today's reality would be completely different than what we have now. Dinosaurs would have bigger brains and would compete with humans for the title of the smartest creature. One of the reasons why humans and parrots can talk is because of the strength and shape of our tongues. The evolved dinosaurs would have a different skull, shaped to fit such a tongue if they wanted to talk like humans. One of the reasons why humans made it to where we are now is because we evolved to stand upright to detect predators. This was one challenge we had to overcome in order to survive. But what would dinosaurs need to challenge if they were already the most dominant creatures? Some of the big-brained dinosaurs had long legs, which means they could run fast, detect predators, and grab food that otherwise would be beyond their reach. Their evolutionary path would be very different from that of humans, and maybe even more advanced. Their brains could have evolved into something impressive. They could turn out smarter than us and possess quicker reflexes. Imagine dinosaurs discovering gravity instead of Isaac Newton, or a dinosaur writing plays and poems better than William Shakespeare. Imagine dinosaurs possessing the creative knowledge to produce some of the finest art in history. Music and cinema would revolve around dinosaur culture, and fashion would look otherworldly. We would live in peace with dinoids, but we would certainly compete with them. The World Cup would feature dinosaurs and humans playing for their national teams, but clubs would be exclusively human or dinosaur. Some professions would be dominated solely by one species, and more physically demanding jobs would be taken by dinosaurs, like laborers and security guards. Eventually, dinosaurs would take over the world since they would be physically stronger than humans and would have better advantages than us. Humans, on the other hand, would need to figure out a way to keep up with dinosaurs. Mammals had a different path of evolution, where they never became gigantic super beasts as dinosaurs did. Instead, their brains developed and grew big. But even though humans are the smartest creatures on the planet, we don't have the biggest brain. Animals like orcas, whales, elephants, and other apes have bigger brains here. So why are we smarter than them? The answer is we don't know. The brain is the most complex organ we have, and we know so little about it. We don't even know exactly why it's so complex or why it behaves like that. Today's dinosaur descendants, like crows and parrots, have complex brains, which allows them to communicate, use tools, and even count. Bigger doesn't always mean better in this case. A parrot's brain is smaller than a cat's, but it's far more complex and intelligent than that of any feline out there. Some scientists argue that dinosaurs from the movies aren't 100% accurate, and that they used to have feathers. In terms of evolution, some small feathered dinos might have followed the path of primates. They might have evolved into a tree-dwelling primate that may also have followed the path of becoming another species of human.
Whoa, there could have been more human species throughout history than we used to think. In one place in East China, Hualongdong, scientists found the remains of a human who lived around 300,000 years ago. They found a jawbone and parts of the skull. They carefully studied these bones to compare them with the bones of other ancient and modern humans. The remains themselves weren't that unusual. We know our human family is really diverse and has been around for millions of years. You know our ancient relative called Australopithecus, right? These fellas lived in different parts of Africa, and they were known for walking on two legs, just like modern humans. But their brains and some other parts of their bodies made them more similar to apes. Their teeth are a good example of how they were like a mix of apes and modern humans. Their canine teeth were smaller than those of apes, but their back teeth were still larger than ours. There were different types of them. You can recognize some Paranthropus because of their big jaws and teeth. One of the most famous fossils of Australopithecus is Lucy, a lady that's about 3.2 million years old. She was found in Ethiopia. So, we know that our family got pretty big from that point, or probably even before it. But it's always great to welcome some new members, which seemed to be the case with this new discovery. Some parts of these bones look similar to the bones of ancient humans, while other parts look more like the bones modern humans have. For example, the person whose bones they found didn't have a real chin. That means we can't put it in any of the groups we know of, like Neanderthals, or maybe even Homo sapiens. So, might we be missing a branch from the human family tree, or an important step in our evolution? What we're looking at here could be some mix between the creatures that became modern humans like us, and the ones that turned into what we today know as Denisovans. It takes time to figure it all out, though. We hadn't known much about Denisovans either, until we found some of their bones in a cave in the mountains. These bones are really rare, and we only had a few pieces to analyze, but their genes told us a lot more about their past than their fossils. Different kinds of humans lived on this planet, but through time, they spread around. One group started living in Africa. Those are our kind, Homo sapiens. Another group went to Europe. That's how we got Neanderthals. But some of these ancient human groups moved all the way to Asia. That's where we can trace a new interesting kind, Denisovans. It seems they're cousins to both modern humans and Neanderthals. The three species actually shared a common ancestor about 765,000 years ago. It's still not clear why Neanderthals and Denisovans took different paths, but one theory says that it was mostly because the Arctic ice sheet expanded southward all the way to the Black Sea, cutting off Europe from Asia. Life, or better yet, the planet, kept them separated for a very long time. Plus, they kept changing places where they lived all the time, always looking for something better, like every other human species before and after them. But this didn't last forever. Scientists found genes from two groups of Denisovans, one in mainland Asia and the other in a place called Melanesia. So not only did they have different groups within their populations, but it also seems that after thousands and thousands of years of developing independently, the members of these three populations, Neanderthal, Denisovans, and modern humans, somehow met again and spread all across the land. 5% of the Denisovan genome lives on, not in the area where scientists found their bones, but in people that live thousands of miles away in Southeast Asia, for instance, in Papua New Guinea. But scientists believed that the cave where they found the remains of Denisovans might be as far north as they had lived. It would have been way too cold for them to survive if they had gone further north. From there, they traveled as far south as Indonesia. This was possible because, during their time, sea levels were lower than today. So Indonesia was connected to mainland Asia. But they probably didn't make it to Australia since it was still separated by water. These three groups mixed together too. Scientists have found a bone of a girl who had a Neanderthal mom and a Denisovan dad. It's the only first-generation hybrid human we've discovered. She even got a cool nickname, Denny. One of the mysteries about Denisovans is how they disappeared. Maybe they mixed so much with other humans that they just blended in. Or it's possible that modern humans' ancestors were stronger, had better tools, or even brought some diseases that didn't affect them, but affect Denisovans. Climate and where they lived might have also played a role. Denisovans lived in a wide range of environments, from cold parts of Asia to tropical Indonesia. Climate changes and the challenges of different habitats might have been really difficult to survive. But it's hard to draw strict lines in our family tree. We're still relatively new at learning about it anyway. Who knows how many new members we are about to discover? Half a century ago, a team of scientists had an idea that a collection of fossils they found at the Great Rift Valley in Tanzania were actually the remains of some new human species. Yup, that was the time when we welcomed Homo habilis into the family. It was a big discovery at that time since people mostly believed that the story of our evolution had been really simple. First, there were Australopiths that looked like apes. After them, there was Homo erectus, the upright man. They most likely lived in Africa around 2 million years ago, but also expanded really quickly across Eurasia. It was the first human species that we know about to have traveled such long distances to find a better place for life. They looked and behaved like humans. Plus, they were probably the first of our ancient ancestors who learned how to deal with fire. Maybe they were the first to cook food as well, and that's what we're definitely thankful for. Cooking food was an innovation that made the human diet more nutritive, and we could grow bigger and smarter brains. So, yeah, Homo habilis made things more complicated. They could walk on 2 legs, but they could also be better at climbing trees than walking on the ground like us. Plus, their brains were smaller than what a human should probably have. At first, it seemed these fossils could be from a completely different side of the family, related to other creatures, Australopithecus africanus, that looked like apes. But more and more digging showed that even though its jaws and teeth were similar, Homo habilis was still bigger and a bit different. The name means handy man, because they were probably able to make and use simple tools. Searching for more fossils in Africa wasn't easy because a team of researchers had to deal with wild animals and tough conditions all the time. But eventually, they managed to find some teeth and a strange skull that was, again, something different from the ancestors we knew about. The teeth were really big, so this new fella got the nickname of Nutcracker Man. For a long time, everyone believed this kind had evolved to eat hard foods. But the fossil teeth didn't show much damage, so they might have been eating food that was softer than we thought. This finding might help us understand how our teeth have been evolving through time, too. And right there, in the same layers of soil where Nutcracker Man was lying, they found ancient stone tools. At first they thought those had belonged to Nutcracker, but as they kept digging, they found more fossils that didn't match Nutcracker Man. It means that someone else must be the real tool maker. But that's another story for another time.
We people used to have real superpowers, but they all disappeared long ago because these abilities became useless and evolution took them away. For example, one of these superpowers was hibernation sleep. Yeah, it doesn't sound as cool as teleportation or flying, but in the modern world, it would be helpful. Imagine that you go to bed before winter and wake up in the spring. No cold weather, no spending money on food at this time, just a long, deep sleep. So perhaps our ancient hominin ancestors, more like primates than humans, could fall into a long hibernation. It was about 500,000 years ago, hundreds of thousands of years before the appearance of the first Homo sapiens. Hominini of that time lived in caves during the Ice Age and fell into a long sleep to survive. However, this is not a confirmed fact, but scientists have some guesses about it. Paleontologists discovered many fossils of our ancestors in one Spanish cave. The analysis showed that Hominini lacked vitamin D and fat reserves. These strange indicators showed that the inhabitants of these caves could be in a state of hibernation. Perhaps their metabolic processes slowed down and their fat and vitamin reserves were depleted to support life during a long sleep. Of course, such an ability could be useful in the modern world, but it has several disadvantages. Let's look at the example of bears and what problems they can face during hibernation. Unique metabolic processes support their long sleep, but if these processes are violated, then after waking up, the bear can get very sick. This may happen because of an insufficient amount of fat and food reserves. Another ability from the past would help save thousands of dollars for modern people. This ability is strong and healthy teeth. Today, we have dental clinics, high-tech equipment, hundreds of types of toothbrushes and toothpaste, mouthwashes, and much more for the health of our teeth. Despite this, ancient people had stronger and healthier teeth. More powerful jaws and sharp teeth allowed them to chew on hard meat, and the immunity of the oral cavity didn't allow bacteria to develop. But then, agriculture appeared. People started to eat grains. This added new species of bacteria to the oral cavity, weakened the jaw muscles, and provoked cavities. Teeth became more fragile, but they got the most severe blow when people discovered sugar. Sweets added a lot of problems to teeth health. Previously, teeth worked as a tool for processing hard materials, but then we began to eat soft food, meatballs, and fried chicken, and the strength of teeth became meaningless. Evolution took that away from us. Our ancestors were taller, stronger, more agile, and more resilient than we are. A couple of days spent in the fields while hunting mammoths were the equivalent of a month of regular training in the gym. People were not obese. They ate natural food and looked like athletes. But why were they taller? What influenced bone growth? Over the past 10,000 years, the changes in growth were most noticeable. But this trend has changed in our direction in the last few centuries. People have started to get taller. It's difficult to determine the exact cause of such changes. It can be genetics, environment, lifestyle, nutrition, or modern technologies. So, 40,000 years ago, Cro-Magnons hunted and gathered in Europe. They were better developed physically, thanks to this lifestyle. Their ancestors migrated to Europe from Africa, which was the reason for the tall growth. Longer bones were helpful for adaptation to the hot African climate, but after 30,000 years, the growth of people sharply decreased because of the onset of cold weather and the development of agriculture. Our ancestors went through times of famine, and their bodies shrank over time to adapt to a meager diet. In addition, living next to livestock provoked the emergence of new diseases. All of it affected the appearance of ancient people. There are almost no such problems now. You can eat healthy food, receive medical care, and take vitamins. All this allowed us to grow a few inches taller. But one change in the human body still remains a mystery. We have the most advanced civilization in history today. People become professionals in neuroscience and thermonuclear physics, create powerful computers, have access to all the knowledge in the world, and study the boundless depths of space. But for some reason, our brains have become much smaller than those of people who lived several thousand years ago. But how is this possible, given that people were engaged in agriculture, trade, and the manufacture of simple tools in the distant past? Then big cities, architecture, art, and technology began to appear. And all this time, our brain was shrinking while humanity was moving forward. It lost a piece equal to 4 ping pong balls. The reason is not that people were more intelligent in the past. The volume of the brain is not related to intellectual level. It's possible that people's brains have shrunk because of collectivity. To understand what that means, let's take a look at ants. Scientists measured the brain size of some species. They saw that species participating in complex social systems had smaller brains. This means that if an ant interacts closely with other ants, sharing work with them, its brain decreases. Sharing duties with other species contributes to brain shrinkage. Its cognitive abilities are distributed among different groups performing different jobs. It seems like a brain unloads its working and thus becomes smaller. That is, if you live alone on an island, do agriculture, fish, and build a house alone, then your brain becomes bigger. But in a large society, where all these activities are distributed among many locals, the human brain is shrinking. In a sense, intelligence becomes collective. And at what point in time did human intelligence become as collective as possible? When writing appeared. It appeared about 2,000 years before the beginning of brain shrinkage. When people learned to write, they freed up a large memory area in the brain. They didn't have to keep all the necessary things and ideas in their minds. With the development of civilization, the collectivization of humankind grew. And then there was TV and the internet. We will discover how this affects our brains in the future. On the one hand, the volume may decrease even more. But on the other hand, we're surrounded by an endless stream of information. We don't know yet how it will affect the size of the brain. The collectivization of consciousness is only one of the hypotheses according to which our brain has increased. Another theory says that this happened because of the home lifestyle. The brain of a dog, cat, or other pet is smaller than their ancestors who lived in the wild without a human. When people started living in cities and spending less energy on getting food, their brains could also begin to shrink. In addition to the size of the brain, people have undergone many changes. Humanity now shows a huge variety in appearance, which the early Homo sapiens didn't have. In the distant past, they possessed the same physical properties characteristic of a particular region. For example, a short and stocky build was typical for people living in cold conditions. The body area of a small person helps to keep warm better. Also, the body area of a tall person gives off heat more efficiently, so people in warm African regions are taller. And in places where it's scorching during the day and frosts come at night, people can develop the ability to lower their body temperature without feeling cold and shivering. This phenomenon concerns the Australian native tribes living in the central desert. The environment affects external characteristics almost as well as genetics, and over the past 40,000 years, the speed of evolution has increased. The ability to travel and the growth of the people population contributed to the mixing of different ethnic groups across the planet, which also provided diversity in evolution. It seems like humanity still comes to the highest point of our evolution, and perhaps there are no limits to that.
If you are one of those folks who can stay up all night and doesn't fancy early wake-ups, you might have some early human Denisovan DNA in you. Now, don't worry, those guys, who were closely related to the Neanderthals, were pretty cool, and it looks like we've got to thank them for inventing fashion. Plus, if you do have Denisovan DNA in you, you could be better adapted to living at high altitudes, have extra muscle strength and endurance, and a stronger immune system. Scientists first discovered Denisovans in 2008 when they found a small piece of a finger bone in Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains. They learned that the bone belonged to a little girl who was between 5 and 7 years old when she passed away around 40,000 years ago. The cold weather in the cave kept the bone in excellent condition. A couple of years later, another team of researchers managed to extract DNA from the find. They compared it to the DNA of modern humans and another ancient human species, Neanderthals. Her DNA was similar to both, but it was also different enough to show that she was part of an entirely new species of humans. No one had known about this group before. They decided to name it Denisovans, after the cave where they found her tiny finger bone. Later, they discovered 3 more Denisovan fossils, including some teeth, also inside the same cave. Scientists also found Denisovan fossils in caves in China and Laos, and 1 jawbone with teeth on the Tibetan Plateau, over 10,000 feet above sea level. Scholars used a technique called uranium series dating on the mineral stuck to the bone. They discovered that it was 160,000 years old. It proves that Denisovans lived at high altitudes much earlier than anyone thought ancient humans could. For comparison, Neanderthals rarely went higher than 6,000 feet. Scientists had already found a special gene in Denisovan DNA that helps people survive in low-oxygen environments. But the Siberian cave where Denisovans lived was only 2,300 feet above sea level. Today, many people living in high places like Tibet, including Sherpas and other local groups, have this same helpful gene. It likely entered their DNA thousands of years ago when Denisovans and modern humans mixed. Because this gene made it easier to live in thin air, it became very common in those populations over time thanks to natural selection. It looks like the Denisovans also had wider skulls than those of us or Neanderthals. They also appeared to have no chin. They did have sloping foreheads, long faces, and large pelvises like Neanderthals, and a large dental arch like modern humans. Denisovans had narrower lips and shorter yet wider noses than modern humans. The scientific community still doesn't know where the Denisovans came from, but one theory says they were ancestors of Homo erectus. Those were the oldest known early humans who had modern human-like body proportions, with elongated legs and shorter arms compared to the size of the torso. About 700,000 years ago, some of them traveled from Africa to Eurasia, probably not by bus. These travelers were like the great-great-great-grandparents of the Denisovans and the Neanderthals. Scientists believe that these 2 groups split up, both in where they lived and in their DNA, around 370,000 years ago. The Neanderthals moved west and settled in Europe and some parts of Western Asia. They lived everywhere, from the Atlantic Ocean in Europe to the Altai Mountains. The Denisovans went in the opposite direction, east into East Asia and Southeast Asia. They even traveled to places like the Philippines and Papua New Guinea and crossed the Wallace Line, which separates Asia from Australia. Researchers have found Denisovan DNA in the genetic code of modern humans from Australia and Melanesia. It's a region in the southwestern Pacific Ocean from Papua New Guinea to the Fiji Islands. Now, it's also possible that you have Denisovan DNA if you come from East Asia, although it's less likely. Central and South Americans also have something Denisovan in their genomes. If you want to be sure, you can take a genetic test that will show the exact percentage, if any. Now, Neanderthals and Denisovans lived in places far from the equator, where the amount of daylight changes a lot with the seasons. Modern humans originally lived closer to the equator, where the length of day and night stays almost the same all year. Scientists think that these differences might have influenced how our internal clocks, called circadian rhythms, evolved to help us wake up, go to sleep, and feel energetic at the right times of the day. In 2017, researchers found that some of the genes that affect how people sleep are linked to latitude, how far north or south someone lives. These genes might have helped ancient humans living in northern areas adjust their body clocks to the changing seasons. Scientists studied DNA from 3 Neanderthals, 1 Denisovan, and 1 modern human. Neanderthals and Denisovans who lived in high-latitude areas, where the amount of daylight changes a lot, had genes that helped them adjust to those light cycles. Modern humans in Africa didn't need those same adaptations because their days and nights stayed more consistent. While modern humans, Neanderthals, and Denisovans had children together, some of their descendants inherited Neanderthal genes that made them more likely to be morning people. Scientists think this wasn't just an evolutionary advantage, but rather a way for their body clocks to adjust more quickly to the changing light in high-latitude regions. A faster internal clock might have helped them wake up and go to bed earlier, which made it easier to adapt to new light patterns. The researchers only studied DNA from 4 ancient humans, and it's hard to tell if these changes in circadian genes were only because of light cycles or also due to other factors, like temperature. Another thing Denisovans probably left behind is fashion. Now, researchers discovered the world's earliest sewing needles with tiny holes for threading in Denisova Cave. These needles date back to the last glacial maximum. Before these fancy needles, people living in the cave used simple tools called bone awls, which didn't have holes for thread. These were fine for making basic clothes, but when the weather turned freezing during the Ice Age, they needed better tools to create more layers of clothing to stay warm. The Denisovans designed the first-eyed needles to stitch together more tightly fitted clothing that could trap heat better. These needles were a big step forward because they allowed for fine sewing that could make their clothes not only warmer, but also more comfortable and durable. Plus, clothes became a way for them to express themselves. Before the Ice Age, people showed off their creativity with body paint and other marks. But when they started covering their skin with clothes to stay warm, they lost those canvases for art. So they began to decorate their clothes instead. Using eyed needles, they could sew beads, fur, and other materials onto their garments and turn simple clothes into works of art. Perhaps it was the beginning of bling. Denisovans sound too good to be true, but they might have passed over one mean gene to you. It helps move zinc around in our cells, and this gene was especially helpful to our ancestors who lived in cold places because it helped them survive the frost. But if there's too much or too little zinc in the body, it might make you predisposed to mental health issues. This gene originally came from people in Asia, but over time it spread to people in Europe, the Americas, and all around the world. Scientists are still trying to figure out why the Neanderthals and Denisovans disappeared, while we, Homo sapiens, survived. The DNA of our extinct long-distance relatives showed that they lived in small groups and often had families within those groups, which might have caused some problems. Our ancestors live in bigger groups with more people and had genetic diversity. This means that there was a mix of traits that can help stay healthier or adapt to changes in weather. Neanderthals and Denisovans didn't have this advantage. Another thing that helped Homo sapiens was the wide social networks that allowed them to share new ideas and tools. So Denisovans probably just couldn't handle the big changes on Earth and adapt to new habitats and disappeared.
Admit it, whenever you think about Neanderthals, You picture these large, human-like creatures wandering around, bumping their heads, afraid of fire, and making weird noises. That's really far from the truth. There's actually more Neanderthal DNA in your genome than you know. It's estimated that up to 4% of the DNA of some modern humans can be traced back to Neanderthals. If you have no idea who these people were, let me get you up to speed. The Neanderthal was a species of early humans that lived in Europe and Western Asia as early as 200,000 years ago. As for their appearance, they looked sort of like us, but they were physically stronger. Their skeleton was also more durable and able to cope with the harsh environment. I mean, 200,000 years ago, people didn't live in houses or apartment complexes. So, their bodies needed to be able to survive in the wild. What's even more surprising is that their brain was larger than ours. But did that make them smarter? To answer that question, let's look at how these people lived back then. Neanderthals were hunter-gatherers, meaning they had to hunt and search for food. Back in their prime years, farming wasn't la mode yet. They were skilled at making tools and objects to protect themselves with, like spears and stone knives. They used these things to hunt animals, yes, but also to make clothing. And speaking of garments, a new study showed that Neanderthals might have been more fashionable than we'd previously suspected. These recent findings show that they may have been skilled in using plants to create yarn. This is based on the discovery of pieces of fabric from over 50,000 years ago in parts of Europe, where Neanderthals used to live. This is really important because it's rare for archaeologists to find perishable artifacts, such as plant products. Most of the things we find these days from previous eras are pottery and pieces of rocks and bones because they can better resist the test of time. Researchers used a special microscope to examine a cord fragment made of twisted fibers, which may have been used for a tool or net. Since it looks like they were able to twist plant fibers into making a cord, Neanderthals had probably been much smarter than we thought. It shows that they had great observational skills and were great at picking out which sort of plant was better to use. They also used fires to keep warm and cook food. It looks like Neanderthals were able to make use of flames that popped out spontaneously, but were not able to create them consistently. Scientists have looked at some Neanderthal sites and found large amounts of ash. That means they had to constantly maintain a fire because they were unable to start it again if it went out. Other specialists believe Neanderthals did use fire, but they did not necessarily need it due to their physical abilities, which allowed them to handle cold temperatures better than modern humans. So, what did Neanderthals eat? Scientists have been able to get a glimpse into their menu, but that's only because these ancient creatures had this nasty habit. They didn't brush their teeth. If you don't brush your teeth regularly, a film called dental plaque will form on the surface of your pearly whites. Over time, this plaque will harden and turn into tartar or dental calculus, which is a combination of minerals, microbes, and leftover pieces of food. Scientists can use bits of the material trapped in dental calculus on fossils to study what our distant cousins ate and what their lifestyles were like. They can also examine ancient DNA to determine the species of microbes present in the mouth of a Neanderthal. Turns out that those living in Belgium ate mostly meat, including woolly rhinoceros and wild sheep, according to the DNA found in their teeth. On the other hand, the Neanderthals found in the El Cedron cave in Spain had a more plant-based diet, including mushrooms, pine nuts, moss, and tree bark. Other Neanderthals from different locations also showed consistent evidence of eating plants. One of the Spanish Neanderthals even had dental problems, and the researchers found evidence of medicinal plants in his teeth. He may have been trying to treat his pain. Another study performed at the University of York found that Neanderthals had some sort of prehistoric healthcare system. It worked regardless of how bad the injury or illness was. The research suggests that this care was provided out of real concern rather than self-interest. This challenges the stereotypical image of Neanderthals as brutes and selfish creatures compared to modern humans. The study found that many Neanderthals had severe injuries requiring ongoing care, such as massage, fever management, and hygiene. One individual who was around 25 to 40 years old at the time of his passing had a degenerative disease that likely severely limited his ability to contribute to the group. Despite this, he was carefully buried, which shows that he remained an important part of the group, despite not being able to contribute much to the daily workload. In case you're wondering, Neanderthals aren't technically our direct ancestors. They're sort of a distant relative, if you'd like, because some of them lived at the same time as modern humans. We coexisted for thousands of years, with Neanderthals living in Europe and Western Asia, and modern humans spreading out of Africa around 50,000 years ago. There is evidence that the two species interacted and even interbred. That's why some humans today have Neanderthal DNA in their genetic makeup. However, the precise nature of their relationship is still debated among scientists. Despite their physical advantages, Neanderthals eventually went extinct. Some people think Neanderthals as a species were not successful because they disappeared a long time ago, but they actually did very well. They lived in difficult conditions for a very long time, much longer than modern humans have been around. Modern humans have only been around for about 100,000 years or so, and only started living in cold areas about 40,000 years ago. There are many factors that may have led to the extinction of Neanderthals. It is believed that changes in their natural climate and competition with modern humans were two of the main reasons. Neanderthals specialized in hunting certain animals, but when those animals went extinct, they may have struggled to find food. Additionally, modern humans had advantages, such as trade networks and better technology, including sewing needles or bows and arrows, which may have given them a competitive edge. Although there is no evidence of direct conflict between the two species, it is known that they interacted. Some people even believe that Neanderthals did not fully go extinct, since their traces of their DNA can still be found in some people. So, what if the Neanderthals hadn't gone extinct? Charles Darwin pointed out that many of the unique traits of humans, like emotions, intelligence, language, and social behavior, can also be seen in some form in other animals. Our closest relatives, such as Homo erectus and Neanderthals, were also quite similar to us. However, Homo sapiens are the only surviving members of the Hominin group, which includes around 20 known and potentially many more unknown species of humans and human-like apes. Even if the Neanderthals had survived, they would have probably integrated into society and evolved at the same time as modern humans did. One theory suggests that since they were outnumbered at one point by Homo sapiens, their traits would have eventually merged with ours. Those less advantageous, like their inability to produce fire, would have disappeared over generations. Other theories suggest that maybe they wouldn't have wanted anything to do with us. Looking at our differences rather than our similarities, maybe they would have developed their own communities, choosing to live separately from the modern world. Either way, it's hard to predict how a species that disappeared so many years ago would behave today. But what we do know is that you need to think twice next time you want to call someone acting weird a Neanderthal. Your DNA might make you the Neanderthal in the room.
You know what? Every species on the planet needs to adapt to the world around it to survive. Human beings are no exception. We didn't exist millions of years ago. The oldest skeleton of a modern person ever found is about 196,000 years old. But even in this relatively short period of time, our species has evolved a lot. In fact, we've never stopped evolving. At least that's what some scientists think, and some of our traits seem to prove it. About 20,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, only children could drink milk without getting an upset stomach. But then humans domesticated animals like cows and goats. A new gene developed in people's bodies down the generations. Today, about a third of all the world's population can drink milk in adulthood. In fact, this ability actually developed independently among different groups of people all over the planet. Our jaws are also not as big as the ones our extinct relatives had. They got smaller because our soft processed food is nothing like the diet of our ancestors. Our teeth themselves have become smaller too. and some have even disappeared completely. Plenty of people may never develop third molars, known as wisdom teeth. But for our ancestors, these teeth were vital. Third molars usually develop when someone is 18 to 25 years old. By this time, most of our ancestors' teeth had become worn out, so the third molars were possibly replacements. But some slight changes in human anatomy may have nothing to do with evolution. For example, people have generally gotten taller over the past few hundred years. The most likely cause of this is simply better nutrition, as well as access to modern medical care, and perhaps basketball. But what changes await humanity in the future? Of course, nobody can tell for sure, but the experts do have some interesting theories. One possibility is that we could get shorter as we adapt to life on our overpopulated planet. Studies have shown that shorter people consume a lot less energy and resources than taller people. In the era of hunter-gatherers, humans didn't meet many others in their day-to-day lives. Now, people have to adapt to life in densely populated cities. And who knows, maybe given enough time, our genes will respond to this change and reduce the average person's height. Another possibility is that more and more people will look alike. Modern humans travel a lot. As different types of people interact and have children, our genes are becoming more and more mixed up. In the future, this might make some physical characteristics a lot more unusual. The average-looking person might have darker skin and hair, and traits like freckles or blue eyes could become a rarity. Some scientists think that evolution won't play an important role in our future at all. Unlike our ancestors who lived millions of years ago, we now have a very advanced culture based on cooperation and modern technology. So, we no longer need to literally struggle to survive. Because of this, we may actually stop developing as a species and remain pretty much the same far into the future. If our evolution does continue, though, there's a chance we'll become more complex and intelligent creatures. Because of technological progress, the way we deal with problems could depend more on our intelligence than our physical abilities. So our brains might become larger. This may already be happening. I know mine is getting bigger. Some scientists' measurements show that the skulls of Americans are actually getting bigger on average. The room in there for the brain has increased about the size of a tennis ball. Or maybe the opposite will happen, and our brains will shrink. This direction of development has actually been around for a lot longer. Some people think that the male human brain has been getting smaller for the past 20,000 years. Hey, just ask females. If it continues to decrease at the same rate for the next 20,000, it'll end up being the same size as the brain of an archaic human who lived about 2 million years ago. Wait, does that mean we're becoming less intelligent? Well, a bigger brain doesn't always mean greater intellect. We just might be evolving to have smaller but super efficient brains. Another theory is that our bodies might learn to use calories from fast food. Things like pizza, fries, and donuts contain trans fats. These chemicals are difficult for our bodies to digest. But what if humans of the future somehow adapt to this kind of food, if we eat it for long enough? After all, the same process has already happened with milk. In a few thousand years, people may develop genes that can break down trans fats and absorb something healthy from them. If they still enjoy eating burgers and fries, of course. Donuts. People of the future might have less hair than we do today. Hair was vital for our ancestors. It helped regulate their body temperature, keeping them warm in cold climates and cool in hot environments. Even today, we still have practically the same amount of hair as many apes do. But some scientists have pointed out that our hair is nowhere as near as important to our survival as it once was. Since we now have modern heating systems and clothing for any environment, maybe given enough time, we'll become a lot less hairy. Then they'll be saying, he wasn't very fuzzy, was he? Yet our hair still serves many purposes. Our eyelashes protect our eyes from dust, and eyebrows keep them clear of sweat. Some experts think the hair on our heads even helps stabilize the temperature of the brain. So we probably won't become completely hairless, just a little smoother. And now the bad news. Human beings of the future may have weakened immune systems and become more vulnerable to illnesses. New medical technology and antibiotics can improve our health, but there's the risk that they could make our immune system lazier and unprepared for fighting infections over time. Many generations down the line, it's possible that the human body might not be able to withstand even simple diseases without serious medical help. Today, human development isn't determined by biology alone. Technology also plays a role. Maybe one day, people will stop waiting for evolution to give them what they want and begin to change themselves using advanced tech. Doctors already use artificial devices to help people with health problems. So who's to say that machinery and computers won't be used in the far future to completely change our physical abilities? Our descendants might get different kinds of brain implants. Or it could be that people will be equipped with artificial eyes with camera functions. But in this scenario, we could also end up being less knowledgeable. Why learn a foreign language or remember historical dates when all the world's information has been downloaded right into your brain? If human beings eventually become a multi-planet species and colonize Mars, our bodies could begin to adapt to life beyond Earth in interesting ways. The contrast between the environment on Earth and the red planet is so huge that evolution may actually speed up. In this case, humans could adapt to the new physical conditions in as little as 6,000 years, or just a few hundred generations. In the low-gravity environment of outer space or alien worlds, the structure of our muscles could change. We won't need some of them, while others will develop more quickly. The amount of body fat we have may increase in a cold climate. Low temperatures may also make us grow thick, long hair again. Our skin may become more pigmented and therefore better protected from harmful UV radiation. And our eyelids might get thicker to protect our eyes from all the cosmic rays outside the Earth's atmosphere.
Let's embark on a wild thought experiment. What if we could magically travel to all our ancestors in chronological order? Could we talk to them and actually form some connection? And just how far back can we go while still connecting with them? Well, let's see. Primates were the funky cousins of other mammals. Around 85 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous period, they went their own way and became the first of their kind. Human evolution is very complicated, and we can't draw a distinctive line on where it started. But we're going to start with hominins. Hominins are a group of primates that include all the species leading up to Homo sapiens. So, imagine you hopped in your super cool time machine and landed in the past, way back when hominins were chilling around. What would happen? First off, you'd spot these quirky creatures roaming around with their short, hairy bodies, curious faces, and big eyes. They might look a bit different from you, but that's part of the fun. They were excellent climbers and incredibly curious about the outer world. They munched on fruits, nuts, and whatever they found in nature. And yes, surprisingly, humans aren't meat eaters by nature. Originally, we all were vegans. Of course, with them, you can forget about proper communication. But still, primates are incredibly smart. So, a good old game of charades could do the trick. Mime your way into their hearts with friendly gestures, and they'll be thrilled to see a futuristic traveler like you. These hominins were curious beings, so they'd probably be very interested in you if you were friendly with them and gave them some food. Next, let's move on to Homo habilis and Homo erectus. Their period, the Stone Age, started about 2.6 million years ago. As you can guess, it was the time when we started using stone tools. The Stone Age lasted for roughly 3.4 million years and ended between 4000 BCE and 2000 BCE. It ended with the beginning of metalworking. Homo habilis, or handyman, was like the MacGyvers of the Stone Age. These crafty creatures were the first to use stone tools. And Homo erectus was the upright man. They were a bit more recent. As their name suggests, they were the first to walk on two legs like us. They might have looked a bit different from modern humans, but still. So what were their lives like? Well, they still were true survivors. Homo erectus loved to explore and tinker with things. They made simple stone tools, like sharp rocks for cutting and scraping. They were basically the early inventors. Homo erectus was quite adventurous. They left Africa and traveled to far-off lands, exploring new territories. They were the first ones to set foot in places like Asia and Europe. They lived in caves or simple shelters made of sticks and animal hides. And let's not forget their wild fashion sense. Animal skins and leaves were their trendy outfits. But don't think they just sat around all day. They were hunters and gatherers, seeking out delicious fruits, nuts, and even hunting animals. How would you communicate with them? Well, they used simple grunts, gestures, and body language to understand each other. So, if you met Homo habilis and Homo erectus, you'd be in for a wild ride. You could show them some advanced technology to impress them and teach them some new cool tricks. Next on our list are Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals. Homo heidelbergensis was like the cool older cousin of Neanderthals and us. They lived around 800,000 to 200,000 years ago. Picture them as sturdy and strong, with big brains compared to their earlier relatives. They were expert tool makers and loved exploring new places. The Neanderthals lived in Europe and Asia from 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. Neanderthals were super smart, and they had awesome adaptations to cold weather. With their thick, strong bodies and big noses, they could handle chilly winters like champs. Both Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals were skilled hunters and gatherers. They'd chase after mammoths and other big game with sharp spears they crafted themselves. But it wasn't all rough and tough. They knew how to have fun, too. Neanderthals made art and showed their emotions and connections with each other. With these folks, you could draw pictures in the dirt, dance around, and make gestures. They'd get the idea. And finally, we meet Homo sapiens. Picture this. You're waking up in a cave with your family, trying to keep warm by a flickering fire. The cave is pretty cozy, isn't it? But nope, no permanent homes here. You're part of a nomadic tribe, moving wherever the food is best. Hey, but at least you've got some nifty tools to survive. Grab your awesome handmade spear, crafted by watching others or maybe invented by your genius self. Time to go hunting mammoths. And if mammoths aren't cooperating, just gather nuts, berries, and bird eggs. Stone Age humans were real foodies. They made flour from oats and spiced things up with wild onions and mustard seeds. There were artists, too. Using minerals and bones, they created stunning images and even flutes for some musical entertainment around the campfire. You still can only talk in body language and facial expressions. But Homo sapiens were smarter than their ancestors, so you could even teach them basic gestures and their meaning, like hands up for mammoth and stuff. Maybe try doing a funky dance or a happy jig. That would get their attention for sure. But this wouldn't be the only way to communicate. Stone Age peeps loved drawing and making flutes, so you could totally join in on the creative fun. Show off your artistic skills with a drawing or two, or maybe even play some tunes. Don't worry, they would be impressed by your skills, even if you aren't that far away from them. But tools are definitely the way to their hearts. If you brought some handy gadgets or cool inventions from our time, they'd be super impressed. Just create some simple tool from the future that can make their lives easier, and they'll love you instantly. So, while you might not be having deep philosophical debates with the Stone Age crew, you can still share some good times. Learning is the way to go. Besides, even though life was shorter back then, averaging around 30 years, it's still enough time to find a partner and have kids. Though, the dating pool might be a bit limited. So let's leave that topic for another time. Just hold on to that axe at night because, well, sometimes our ancestors would eat each other and like to do some head-dumping battles. Yikes. Let's finish our journey with the Bronze Age, just for fun. This cool era lasted from around 3300 to around 1200 BCE, and guess what? They were all about that strong metal called bronze. It's the time when people got creative and started using bronze to make all sorts of cool things. Bronze is a combo of copper and tin, making it harder and more durable than anything else at the time. Awesome civilizations started popping up all over the place. They either made their own bronze by smelting copper and mixing it with tin, or traded for it with other places. So, as you step into this ancient era, you'll be amazed by the sight of bustling Bronze Age cities with majestic bronze gates, amazing markets, and grand temples dedicated to powerful gods. During the Bronze Age, we finally developed languages and writing. Mesopotamia and Egypt were leading the way with their fancy cuneiform and hieroglyphs, the earliest writing systems ever. They were basically the kings of calligraphy. Remember, the language might be a bit different. You'd be hearing unfamiliar words. But with these humans, you can at least use drawings, art, and many other things to communicate. Anyway, this is what meeting our ancestors would be like. What a wild journey through time. So, remember to cherish our past and appreciate the wonders of our modern world. Stay tuned.
You're way more Neanderthal than you think, at least when it comes to your DNA. These ancient hominids were shorter and stockier than humans today. They made stone tools, used fire, wore clothing, and had some rituals of their own. The official theory says that they went extinct 40,000 years ago, but a new study says Neanderthals probably never really disappeared completely, but could have mixed with modern humans. It looks like every modern human has about 3% of the Neanderthal genome in their DNA. If it's accurate, it means Neanderthals were more connected with our ancestors than we previously thought, and shared a long history of living together. Neanderthals were very close relatives of modern humans, but our families separated about 500,000 years ago. More than 10 years ago, scientists discovered that Neanderthals had families with the early humans who traveled out of Africa. Because of this, people living outside of Africa today have about 1 to 2% of Neanderthal DNA in their genes. We now have only 3 really good examples of complete genetic code from these ancient hominids. The first one comes from bones found in a cave in Croatia that are 50,000 to 65,000 years old. 2 more examples, which are about 80,000 and 50,000 years old, were found in caves in Eurasia. Scientists still aren't sure as much about how modern human DNA got into the Neanderthal genetic alphabet because they don't have enough material to study. But they did compare the existing DNA of 3 Neanderthals with the DNA of 2,000 modern humans. They found that the Neanderthal DNA might be made up to 3.7% of modern human genetic code. It means that in the ancient Neanderthal population, about 1 in 30 parents were modern humans. The scientists found that modern human DNA got mixed into the Neanderthal genetic alphabet during at least 2 periods when humans and Neanderthals were interbreeding. This happened once about 200,000 to 250,000 years ago, and again about 100,000 to 120,000 years ago. There might have been other times they mixed, but we can't see those in the DNA we have now. Another recent study, which hasn't been fully checked by other scientists yet, says that most of the Neanderthal DNA in modern humans came from one big period of mixing, about 47,000 years ago, that lasted for almost 7,000 years. Scientists found skulls that are about 100,000 years old in 2 caves in the Middle East. These skulls look like they belonged to early modern humans, but have some features like bigger eyebrows that might show they had Neanderthal DNA. This could be because of gene flow from Neanderthals, and it fits in the mixing time frame. The The study also looked at the genetic differences in the 3 Neanderthal genomes and found out that Neanderthals had an even smaller population than scientists thought before. It could be another proof that Neanderthals didn't just go extinct, but became part of the modern human gene pool. Many groups of modern humans left Africa and mixed with Neanderthals so much that Neanderthals couldn't stay separate. In the future, scientists want to study how modern human DNA affected Neanderthals. This could help us understand if this mixing had good or bad effects on Neanderthals. Neanderthals aren't our only relatives from the past. There used to be at least 9 species of humans on our planet. One of them, Homo habilis, earned the nickname handyman because stone tools were found with its remains. It lived in eastern and southern Africa. This early human had a slightly larger brain than its older relatives and an ape-like face. Homo habilis was about 4 feet tall and ate a variety of foods. For a long time, scientists thought Homo habilis was the oldest member of our human family. But new dating methods have shown that Homo erectus, another ancient human, might be older and not related to Homo habilis. Homo naledi is a more mysterious member of our human family, discovered in a South African cave in 2013. It's the only region of the world where their remains were found. They walked on 2 feet, but were also good at climbing trees. They were small, about 4 feet 9 inches tall, weighed around 88 pounds, and had small brains. We don't know much about how they lived since we haven't found stone tools or other cultural evidence. But some scientists think they might have buried their deceased and made cave art. In 2010, scientists found some fossils in a cave in Siberia, but they weren't sure what species they belonged to. These fossils are from a group called the Denisovans, who lived between 194,000 and 51,000 years ago. We don't know much about them because we only have a few fossils, but DNA analysis has shown that Denisovans were closely related to Neanderthals and modern humans. They even had families with early humans, especially in Southeast Asia. There aren't enough fossils to give Denisovans their own species name, but their genes are found in modern humans, which means they might be part of our own species. As scientists study more about Denisovans and fossils in Southeast Asia, we might understand better how different species fit into the Homo family tree. In 2003, they found fossils of a very small human-like species in a cave on the island of Flores in Indonesia. These tiny people lived between 100,000 and 50,000 years ago. They were only about 3 feet 6 inches tall. Scientists think they might have come from another species, Homo erectus, and became smaller over time because they lived on an island with limited food. Because of their small size, they're often nicknamed hobbits. Around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens, yep, that's us, were the last humans left out of many different kinds of human-like species that walked on 2 legs. So, the logical question is, what happened to the others? And what did we have to do with their disappearance? Some scientists think we survived because our offspring lived longer, or because we were better at handling changes in the weather. Others think we might have competed with other human species, or maybe mixed with them and shared genes. About 300,000 years ago, the first Homo sapiens lived in Africa. They didn't look exactly like us, but they were more similar to us than other early humans. They had tall, round skulls with almost straight foreheads. Unlike Neanderthals, they didn't have thick brows or jutting jaws like Homo naledi. They also had chins, which no other early humans had, though we still don't know why. Homo sapiens lived in bigger groups and had more genetic diversity compared to other early humans. This helped us in many ways, not just in staying healthy. Having big social networks across different places was like having a safety net. If we ran out of food or water, we could go to other groups we were connected to, and they would help us because we weren't strangers, we were family. These big networks also helped these early humans share new ideas and inventions. A big simulation showed that later species of humans could live in many different environments because of these wide networks and the ability to adapt. We know that Neanderthals were really smart, but Homo sapiens might have been just a little bit smarter. Small inventions like weaving and sewing needles could have given Homo sapiens an edge. Scientists have found evidence of weaving from 35,000 years ago and sewing needles from 30,000 years ago. Weaving lets you make things like baskets and nets to catch food. Sewing needles help you make better clothes and tents, which keep you and your youngsters warm and safe, which is very important for survival.
So, how would you feel if you accidentally met your relative who lived around 9,000 years ago? It's exactly what happened to Adrian Target, a retired history teacher from Somerset, England. He noticed a familiar face on the front page of several newspapers. It was the image of the so-called Cheddar Man. Sounds cheesy, right? Anyway, his skeleton was discovered in 1903 in Cheddar Gorge near Somerset. Now that makes sense. Scientists used his DNA as a model to create a portrait of one of the oldest humans found in Britain who lived back in the Mesolithic period. Cheddar Man's initial DNA analysis has shown that he was a typical representative of the Western European hunter-gatherer society. Years later, with the use of new technology, the scientists managed to establish that he had dark brown or black hair, dark skin, and bright blue eyes. In 1997, researchers analyzed genetic material taken from the cavity of one of Cheddar Man's molar teeth and compared it to samples taken from locals whose families were known to have lived in the Cheddar area for centuries. The test found that Mr. Target was, indeed, Cheddar Man's direct descendant. The genes were passed from mother to daughter across 300 generations. The only obvious difference in appearance between the two was skin coloring. As humans migrated north from the harsh African sun many thousands of years ago, their skin got lighter to absorb more sunlight and vitamin D. But this process didn't happen overnight. So the skin of Cheddar Man is much darker than that of his offspring, who was born under the cold British sun. Mr. Target admitted that he didn't know how he felt about the test results. He wasn't surprised, though, as he recognized his nose shape and bright blue eyes in his ancestor's face. His name ended up in the Guinness World Record books as the farthest traced descendant by DNA. Studying Cheddar Man also opened up some new evidence of when and how farming came to the British Isles. Researchers concluded that the hero of the day was a part of an extended group of families of around 30 people. It looks like they came after the woolly mammoth had disappeared, but before farming became a thing in the area. The oldest traceable family tree before Mr. Target's case stretched back 5,200 years, which is older than Rome. The lineage of the Chinese Kang clan spans over 80 generations. It includes more than 2 million people, and one of them is the famous philosopher Confucius himself. And it still holds the title of the most accurate longest family tree. Ever wondered how many ancestors you have? Well, let's do some math here. So first, it's 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents. Yeah, if we keep multiplying by 2 and go back 10 generations, we get 1,204 ancestors. It sounds like quite a crowd, but 10 generations aren't that many when it comes to thousands of years of human history. About 20 generations, or 400 years ago, each of us should have about 1 million ancestors, and 800 years ago, 1 trillion ancestors. In theory, it leaves us with hundreds of trillions of people, which is practically impossible since there have never been that many people on Earth. Imagine there lived a guy around 1,000 years ago. His daughter was your mother's 33rd great-grandmother, and his son was your father's 33rd great-grandfather. It would mean he's on 2 branches of your family tree, both on your mother's and on your father's side. Most people who lived at that time would actually appear on our family trees not just twice, but thousands of times. There were just around 200 million people on Earth back then. It means that each of them would have to appear 5,000 times on the family tree of each of us living today. Life isn't that mathematically even, though. Some people from the past never had children, and others had many of them, which means they'd be featured on the trees of many, many people. Steve Olson, author of the book Mapping Human History, used the help of a statistician, a computer scientist, and a supercomputer to calculate how interconnected the human family tree is. If you went back in time 2,000 to 5,000 years, you'd meet a human who could call everyone currently living their descendant. A journey a bit further in time, say 5,000 to 7,000 years ago, would let everyone living today meet their ancestors, and that would be the same people. This supports the theory that our family trees aren't inverted pyramids that keep endlessly widening, but diamonds. You start from yourself, and as you go back several generations, you see it grow wider. Then, at some point, the tree starts narrowing as it goes down to only a few ancestors and even to one person. This person probably lived a few thousand years ago, during the reign of Tutankhamun, or maybe during the golden age of ancient Greece. They didn't do anything particularly outstanding, and they never knew they would be the ancestor of nearly 8 billion people living on our planet today. So, the next time you visit an exhibition of ancient Egyptian art from the times when pyramids were built, remember that every hieroglyph and every piece of jewelry there was created by one of your great-great-great multiplied by hundreds grandparents. And that mummy in the center of the hall most likely is your ancestor as well. On average, most of us can trace our ancestry with high accuracy back to the 1600s. If you decide to build your family tree, you've got to do some research and learn as much about your ancestors as you can. Start at home and study all papers and photos you can find in the attic or basement. Letters, especially the ones with dates on them, diplomas, report cards, diaries, and postcards are all going to be your best friends in the search. You can also check out the local library or archives. They should have census records that can help you. The results of your search will depend on your ancestors' social status and past wealth. It's always easier to find data on someone wealthy and important to their community. Now, in some cases, birth records might be destroyed or misplaced. Your origins can also affect the search, as many cultures had oral histories and didn't record anything in writing. In Western Europe, they started keeping genealogical records during the 1500s. Before that, family members memorized their whole lineage, and of course, they mostly remembered only the names. Sometimes they'd also remember major events alongside key ancestors. In some cases, in ancient times, genealogy helped find the lawful heir to the throne. Royals and nobles who were candidates for the position would present their genealogical trees, just like you send your CV and recommendation letter now. The U.S. didn't start keeping lineage records until around 1910. Switzerland has records that stretch back over 700 years. China, for comparison, has been doing it for over 2,000 years. Another priceless source of knowledge is your elderly relatives. Each artifact you find and show them will most likely encourage a long and interesting story full of names and details. There are many free websites that will help you organize the information you find. The more users the website has, the more likely you are to find some of your ancestors in someone else's tree. You can also use your findings, especially stories you managed to recover, to write your family history book. Be prepared that this research might take many years. The more ancestors you find, the more you'll still have to discover. In case you prefer biology to paperwork, you can try taking a DNA ancestry test. Scientists will analyze your genetic material to trace the migration paths of your ancient ancestors from 1,000 years ago, and will give you some information on your ancestral roots. You won't learn much about who your relatives were, though. Current tests can't go back further than 8 generations. There are many testing services available, and if you choose the ones with a large database, you have more chances of getting a match with other people looking for ancestors. Happy hunting! Throughout time, scientists have managed to uncover about 6,000 early human fossils, ranging from skulls to teeth. For some of these fossils, it was a breeze. Researchers could instantly identify them as belonging to, say, the Neanderthals. However, when it came to others, things got a bit trickier. Some fossils just didn't fit into any existing categories. So, what categories of prehistoric humans do we actually know about? Well, up until recently, we recognized 8 different species of early humans. One of these is Homo habilis, which means handyman. You'll recall that Homo is Latin for human. They resembled regular primates, but were pivotal in our evolution. They were the first to create stone tools, which significantly aided their daily activities, such as butchering. Next up, we have Homo rudolfensis. These guys were larger than Homo habilis and boasted bigger brains, but they were still quite distant from modern humans. For example, even though the neurological structure of their brains was becoming more complex, they were probably not capable of using any form of actual spoken language. Then came Homo erectus, the first to walk upright, followed by Homo antecessor, which is considered the last common ancestor of modern humans and Neanderthals, along with a host of other Homo species. Meanwhile, we're still piecing together the story of the enigmatic Denisovans. Our knowledge of Homo naledi is pretty limited too, since it was only discovered in 2013, and it is species number 8. Interestingly, Naledi means star in the Sotho language because they were found in a cave called Rising Star. Scientists were taken aback by them. Everything suggested they were around 2 million years old. But after closer examination and some tests, it turns out that the Naledi species is much younger, between 236 and 335,000 years old. Their hands were adapted to making tools, yet no tools have been found nearby. Long story short, they're a puzzling species, and there's still so much more to learn about them. So even though today we have only one human species on our planet, Homo sapiens, we continue to discover ancient species that are long gone. Now you might wonder why researchers study these extinct species. The truth is, they need this knowledge to piece together the intricate narrative of our prehistoric past. In 2024, a significant discovery emerged, the 9th human species, named Homo giluensis, which translates to large-headed. Researchers suggest that this species hunted wild horses, crafted stone tools, and processed animal hides to survive harsh winters. A researcher from the University of Hawaii noted that the discovery of this potential new species came about while his team was developing a novel method for classifying fossil evidence. Interestingly, one potential representative of Homo giluensis isn't entirely new to science. The Denisovans, first identified in 2010 through DNA analysis of a finger bone found in Siberia, have yet to be classified as a distinct species. Some scientists propose that they may actually belong to this newly identified group. These big-headed individuals could help shed light on the long-standing mysteries surrounding these hominin fossils, which have puzzled researchers due to their mixed characteristics of Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. You see, sometimes it's tough to call a spade when you don't even know what a spade looks like. You get the idea? Many unsolved mysteries linger, simply because scientists haven't had this crucial, big-headed piece of the puzzle. So theoretically, we modern humans could also be considered a bit of Homo giluensis. You don't believe me? Well, watch this. We need to consider two key facts for this equation. First, there are the Denisovans, a group we might refer to as Homo giluensis from a scientific perspective. Yeah, this is just a theory proposed by some researchers, but let's roll with it for now and pretend it's a fact. Second, it's important to know that the Denisovans interbred with the ancestors of modern-day Melanesians. These folks inhabit areas ranging from New Guinea to the Fiji Islands and carry between 4 and 6% Denisovan DNA. Now, you might not personally have those genes, unless you've been tested, of course, but the key takeaway here is that there are modern humans today who share genetic links with the Denisovans, or Homo giluensis, or big heads if you prefer. Now, that all sounds pretty plausible. Let's unpack step by step how it happened. Researchers have uncovered this type of ancient human, known as the Denisovans, based on skeletal remains found in Siberia. These ancient humans coexisted and interbred with modern humans, adding yet another layer to our understanding of human evolution. Named after the Siberian caves where their fossils were discovered, the Denisovans are believed to have roamed widely across Eurasia. Evidence indicates that the Denisovans lived alongside Neanderthals and interacted with early Homo sapiens, possibly around 50,000 years ago. A team of scientists successfully sequenced a complete genome from these ancient hominins using nuclear DNA extracted from a finger bone. This discovery reveals that at least 4 distinct human groups existed during the time when anatomically modern humans began migrating out of Africa. Alongside modern humans and Neanderthals, we now have to consider the Denisovans and another small human species from Indonesia, often referred to as the Hobbit, when discussing our evolutionary history. One intriguing question that arises is why Denisovan genes are predominantly found in modern Melanesians, yet absent from other Eurasian populations. Remember that 4 to 6%? One hypothesis suggests that interactions between the Denisovans and early modern humans were limited and brief, especially as humans migrated throughout Southeast Asia into Melanesia. Scientists speculate that only a small number of the Denisovans may have interbred with a larger group of modern humans. This could explain how the Denisovan genes made their way into the gene pool despite the likelihood of infrequent encounters. Anyway, the more scientists dig into our past, the more fascinating things they uncover about our ancestors. Take Neanderthals, for example. Did you know these guys were responsible for creating the very first piece of art ever? I had no idea. But a 2018 study of ancient cave art in Spain revealed what are now considered the oldest known artistic creations. We used to think Neanderthals lacked the cognitive skills needed for art, but it turns out they were actual art pioneers. Not only did they create art, but they also seem to have invented hashtags thousands of years before Chris Messina did it in 2007. Right, I'm kidding, but you'll soon get why I mention hashtags. The artworks found in several caves in Spain include simple hand stencils, a ladder-like drawing, and various other markings. Until recently, these prehistoric pieces were believed to have been made by early humans. But new testing methods suggest they're much older than we thought. Above all, the earliest recognized Neanderthal artwork, which looks like a hashtag, was discovered in Gibraltar back in 2014. To determine the age of these artworks, scientists employed advanced dating techniques using eHarmony and Match.com. Oops, wait a minute, wrong dating techniques. They actually used uranium and thorium radioisotopes instead of the traditional carbon dating. Once the necessary tests were completed, they confirmed the art was approximately 65,000 years old, 15,000 years older than the previously oldest known art from Indonesia. At that time, the only species around were Neanderthals, so it's safe to say they were behind these creations. Modern humans didn't arrive in Spain until about 20,000 years later. Hey, it was a long commute. That rules them out as the hashtag creators. The hand stencil was likely created intentionally, with the artist preparing the pigment and applying it over their hand. Plus, the caves also contain a collection of painted seashells that are an astonishing 115,000 years old. Some of these shells have been drilled, suggesting they might have been used as jewelry. Some specialists argue that the fact Neanderthals created art hints that they might have also had some form of spoken language. So maybe it's time we fully embrace Neanderthals as part of our lineage. They're humans too, just a different branch of our family tree. While these findings are intriguing, some experts remain skeptical about the new dating methods, claiming they're not entirely convinced. Hey, what do you think? Share your thoughts in the comments. You run through the night forest for more than an hour. You're even faster than a cheetah. You're not tired or cold. You hear a mouse rustling in the roots of a tree and catch all the smells of the forest. With night vision, you see a bird in the night sky. You can go for months without food or water. Gills allow you to swim underwater freely. This is how evolution made humans in a parallel world. Here, they're ideal organisms prepared for anything they might meet in the wild. In our world, things are more complicated. We evolved, but didn't always get stronger. Humans only survived because they adapted and changed the world around them. A human only has 32 teeth. When they fall out, they no longer grow. But evolution doesn't stop. Our food has become softer and more nutritious. You don't need to chew it for a long time. New diet reduced the jaw and enlarged the brain. As a result, there's no room left for the 4 teeth that are closest to the joint. We call them wisdom teeth. In the future, we'll only have 28 teeth. And even today, 35% of people don't have the wisdom teeth. Homo sapiens is the only mammal to have a chin. This is the protrusion along the lower edge of the jawbone. Even our relatives, gorillas and chimpanzees, have their jaws slanted inward. Anthropologists think that the chin is a result of reduction of human face. Perhaps in the past, the chin supported our powerful jaw and enhanced our strength. Over millions of years, the face has shrunk, but the chin has remained. Put your hand on a flat surface, connect your ring finger and thumb, bend your wrist, and you'll see the palmaris longus. 15% of people don't have this muscle already. It doesn't affect the grip strength and has lost its meaning today. Millions of years ago, it allowed our ancestors to deftly climb trees. Evolution deprived us of this useful skill, but the remainder of it remained with us. Dogs, horses, monkeys, and many other animals can move their ears. This allows them to hear better and communicate with each other. Humans have a long, flexible neck, and evolution has left them without this ability. Still, 20% of modern humans can do it. This is another reminder of a time when we weren't much different from other animals. 10% of people have a Darwin's tubercle in their ear. In the past, we had pointy ears looking like the modern macaw's ones, and this little bump is the proof. When an emperor penguin hatches eggs, it doesn't eat for 115 days. Scorpions can stay hungry for a whole year. Evolution hasn't given humans a camel-like hump of fat or the ability to hibernate like a bear. Every morning, our ancestors woke up and fought for their survival. We need a lot of energy for this, so we have to eat every day. This isn't very convenient, especially when your food isn't sold in the supermarket but runs away from you through the forest or field. In the human brain, at any given moment, 100 billion neurons work. Thanks to this, you have a good memory and can talk. This is essential for survival. A big brain has a flaw. For neurons to work, it needs a lot of fuel. It makes up just 2.5% of body weight, but consumes 20% of its energy. In 2 hours of playing chess, a grandmaster burns 560 calories. A professional tennis player will spend the same amount of energy in a single hour. Big brains make us weak. Even a small chimp is much stronger than a human. Why do you need muscles if you no longer swing from branches? But you need a big brain to negotiate and cooperate with other people. Got weaker, and we like lying on the couch more and more. This is a comfortable position for thinking. At night, our ancestors were especially vulnerable. When you sleep in a new place, the left side of your brain is more awake than the right one. This brain reaction is called the first night effect. This is an ancient reaction of the body to the dangers that awaited a human in the dark. 40 to 60 million years ago, evolution gave us yet another fear. We're born with the fear of being bitten by a snake or spider. Apparently, these animals were the main danger to the first primates. Anthropologists say we became runners 2 million years ago. Broad shoulders make it convenient to swing your arms and keep balance. A special ligament extends from the spine to the back of the head. It stabilizes the head while running. No primate has strong gluteal muscles. They only turn on to full power when you're running. Hairless and 3 million sweat glands keep our bodies from overheating. People are perfect runners, but evolution has made us slow. You'll never overtake a chimp on a short distance, and that's not mentioning cheetahs. They accelerate to an incredible 70 miles per hour. But almost all land animals are sprinters and don't run for more than 10 to 15 minutes. Humans are adapted for long distances. Walking 2 legs helped our ancestors solve many problems. They freed their hands to carry food or tools. 2 legs and a straight back made our ancestors larger and even scarier for other animals. When you stand on 2 legs, you'll quickly see a saber-toothed tiger, which is waiting for you in the tall grass of the plains or the African savanna. Your body weight is distributed over only 2 limbs, and this has consequences. You can calmly walk down the street, stumble, and get injured over that. Consider this our payment for upright walking. So why do we need toes? Certainly not to hit them on the furniture. When our ancestors lived in the trees, toes helped them cling to branches. Imagine you can work at the computer, draw pictures, or cook scrambled eggs, all with your feet. Cool, but good old evolution has deprived us of this skill. Today, we're not sitting in the trees, but our feet remain flexible. Come to think of it, hooves would be more suitable for us. They're durable and don't need shoes. But until we evolve again, our feet remain fragile. Either of them has 26 bones. This doesn't make our walking or running any safer. You go to the cinema, take your popcorn basket, and start munching on it in anticipation of a great couple of hours. But then you start choking. Those few minutes of coughing and involuntary tears seem to last forever. The human is the only mammal that can choke on its food. We can't eat and breathe at the same time. The reason for this is the structure of our vocal apparatus. Your larynx is down below, thanks to which you can talk, but not while eating. Goosebumps, horripilation, gooseflesh, these are the names of the reflex that makes your skin not smooth but bumpy. This happens when you're cold or scared. Greetings from the Stone Age. Our ancestors were covered in thick hair. When they got scared, the hair follicles rose. This made them large and menacing for other animals. This natural reaction warmed the body as the air grew colder. The body of modern people no longer has long and thick hair. But if that movie is really scary, or you forgot your jacket in the evening, goosebumps still appear. Bears, hedgehogs, bats, some turtles, fish, and insects. All these creatures have one thing in common: they hibernate. Scientists claim that our ancestors were also on this list. In a cave in the north of Spain, researchers found fossilized bones of ancient people. The analysis showed that 500,000 years ago, humans could spend several months hibernating, similar to bears. Thanks to this, they survived Ice Age. Wow, how I miss this skill. Our eyes allow us to see dust in the air and huge mountains on the horizon. We see the world in color and recognize each other's faces. And when it gets darker, our vision quickly adapts to new conditions. But we don't see well in the dark. Evolution hasn't given us the sight of a tarsier. This primate is the size of a baseball and can see perfectly in the dark. Tarsiers could easily catch a beetle flying through the night forest. Still, I wouldn't want my eyes to take up most of my face, and beetles are actually not among my favorite after-dark snacks. How about you?
There's this interesting ancient site near St. Louis, Missouri, that a lot of people don't know about. It's called Cahokia, and it used to be a huge city with up to 20,000 people living there back in the 11th century. It's full of these massive earthen mounds that were built by hand, and the biggest one is still there today, at the Cahokia Mound State Historic Site. Even though we don't know everything about this civilization, researchers have been able to piece together some information from the remains they've found. For starters, they found some pretty old teeth at this site. After studying their appearance and structure, scientists suggest that a lot of different indigenous groups lived there. About a third of them came from other areas in the middle of the continent, which they figured out by studying the different levels of various substances in the teeth. And get this, the way the mounds are arranged shows that this was actually a planned-out city, not just a bunch of villages grouped together. The rulers lived on top of the mounds, while everyone else lived in other structures. It's amazing to think that they were doing things like farming, hunting, logging, pottery, and weaving, all within this one giant city. Right in the middle of Cahokia, there was this giant mound that was about 100 feet tall, and around it, there was this huge wooden fence. Inside the fence was the city center, which had a big open space called a plaza. Archaeologists think that the plaza was designed to represent the 4 cardinal directions of the world. It was like the people who built it wanted to create a place that was in harmony with the universe. The center of the city was where they held ceremonies and events, and it was such a big deal that people from outside Cahokia would come to be a part of them too. What became of this city? Hard to tell. Some people think that the reason it fell apart is that they cut down too many trees and the land got all messed up. Other scientists believe that's not true because the soil was still in pretty good shape after the city was gone. The Europeans were not even around at that time, so they couldn't have influenced the downfall of Cahokia either. There's also one theory that suggests there were fights with other communities that caused the city to collapse. These days, there are over 65 preserved mounds, and you can even climb the steps of the tallest one. The best part is that local authorities are thinking of making it a national park, so you should totally plan to visit before it gets too crowded. Mohenjo Daro is another lost ancient city that's still surrounded by mystery. Located in modern-day Pakistan, it was a city that flourished during the Bronze Age, and it was extremely advanced for its time. It had things like water systems and fancy architecture that other cities didn't have back then. Despite these features, it's not as well known as other ancient cities, like those in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's even weirder is that at some point, the city was abandoned, and no one knows why. Archaeologists found the city in 1911, but it took a while for them to realize how important it was. Eventually, they uncovered a lot of really interesting things about the city, like its advanced sanitation system. Excavations uncovered over 700 wells, as well as private baths and a large communal bath. Remarkably, even private homes had toilets, and waste was efficiently disposed of through a city-wide sewage system. They also had a lot of trade connections and made some really beautiful objects, like pottery, jewelry, and figurines that were sold all over the region. Despite its amazing culture and knowledge, scientists have yet to figure out why the city was abandoned. Some people think changes in the nearby river might have had something to do with it. The writings that the people of Mohenjo Daro left behind are still a complex code, even for the most skilled specialists, making it even harder to piece together their history. Have you heard of the lost city of Kolmanskop? It used to be a small settlement in the Namib Desert. Legend has it that it got its name from a man named Coleman who got stuck in the local dunes and was never seen again. But that's not the interesting part. In 1908, a railway worker found a shiny stone and showed it to the chief railway foreman, who turned out to be a hobby mineralogist. They discovered it was a diamond, and soon, Kolmanskop became the richest town in Africa and one of the richest places in the world. It had luxurious stone houses, a school, a hospital, and even an ice factory to produce ice for fridges. The hospital had the first X-ray machine in southern Africa, which was supposedly used to check if workers were illegally swallowing diamonds. Its popularity began to decline in the late 1920s when another diamond-rich location was discovered nearby. Most of the inhabitants soon began to flee the city in search of a better life, leaving the buildings abandoned. In 1938, all machinery was taken south and the town was left to the desert. The last inhabitant left Kolmanskop between 1956 and 1960. The hot climate and low humidity have preserved the structures over time, and tourists can now visit this desert ghost town. You've surely heard about this next ancient city, Machu Picchu. It's this incredible ancient location in Peru. It stretches across a huge piece of land in the Andes Mountains and sits high above sea level. It's even considered one of the wonders of the modern world. But here's the thing. Scientists aren't exactly sure what it was used for. It could have supported up to 750 people, but there aren't a lot of human clues left behind. Some people think it was more of a spiritual or ceremonial place, while others believe it may have been like a fancy spa retreat for the nobles. The extensive terraces might mean it was used for crop testing or as a trading hub. And there's even a theory that it was used as a prison because they found a cell-like area too. It's amazing that even today, archaeologists and historians are still puzzled about how it was built. Did you know that they probably didn't even use wheels for transportation? And those massive granite rocks were somehow pushed up the steep Andean mountains, even though most of them weighed a lot. Some historians think that hundreds of people worked together to push each rock up the peak. The huge stones at Machu Picchu are also so close together that you can't see any cracks between them. It's pretty cool because it also makes the area safe during earthquakes, which is important since Peru is a shaky country. But how did the stones stay put during all those quakes? They actually move a little bit, but then they go back to their original spot, almost like they're dancing. Some people think wet wooden wedges were used to keep them in place, but that doesn't really add up, considering how big the structures are. Locals back then also seem to have built Machu Picchu without using any pack animals or iron tools. They had to sculpt and put everything together using mostly their hands. Plus, the citadel is built on a fault, so they had to move a bunch of stone and earth to make it flat. Scientists also think that the real construction is actually underground because of the deep foundations and drainage system. In fact, there's a hidden water system that was just recently discovered using 3D scanning. They didn't even use mortar to put the granite blocks together. They were so precise that you can't even fit a sheet of paper between them. One theory suggests that people that lived there used stone tools made of a harder material than the stone they were cutting.
You know, a lot happened in the first millennium CE. Sure, we're talking about 1,000 years worth of human history. If you'll remember from school, you'll know it was the time of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. It was when humans saw the transition to the intense times of the Middle Ages. And some say it was the apex period of the Mayan civilization, all the way in Mesoamerica. But thanks to top-notch technological advancements, we can look at history a lot differently today. You see, archaeologists have found actual proof that the Mayan civilization may have started way before we think it did, and that since the beginning, their civilization was far from simple. To find out more about this, you'll have to tread deep into the Guatemalan rainforests. Are you down for the ride? Rainforests are dense and difficult to access. If you were an archaeologist, I'm betting you'd find them quite threatening as well. That's actually one of the reasons why we've been kept in the dark for so long when it comes to the truth about the Mayans. But take a look at this. You'd expect to see ruins like this in places like Portugal, England, or the United States. I'm talking about 130-foot wide roads, painted white to help travelers journey through the nighttime. For scale, these roads were about half the size of an American football field. Huge, huh? Scientists recently unearthed a 110-mile network of roads such as these, and they think this dates back to before the first registered Mayan ruins we've known so far. These roadways, which sometimes ran over swampy ground and were even elevated at times, are being called the world's first superhighways. Even if there is no registry of animal-powered vehicles, it's believed that the Maya used them to travel around a network of possibly 964 settlements. They were built like a huge spider web, and from what archaeologists have gathered, they worked as an implied system of economic and social interactions. This completely debunks the traditional idea that the Mayan pre-classic period, which dates back to 1000 to 350 BCE, was made of small tribal settlements. Imagine the manpower and engineering ability you need to muster to build something close to these white highways. Scientists believe that these causeways were built pretty much the same way as the Mayans built their pyramids. Oh, and if you're wondering about these gigantic pieces of architecture, don't worry, we'll talk about them in a bit. Now, so far, scientists believe that the roads were built with a mixture of mud and quarry stone. Oh, and using several layers of limestone, of course. Researchers were only able to find all of this out because of a new technology called LiDAR imaging. Do you know how we've used sonar technology to map out the ocean bed? Well, this is very similar to that. But instead of using sounds, we use laser systems. This mapping system allows researchers to see through and beyond the thick canopies of forests. It's like we have X-ray vision. This is definitely a game changer. But lost Mayan cities began to be unearthed in the mid-20th century, and since then, ruins from cities such as Tikal, Palenque, and Uxmal have been rediscovered. But let's take a few steps back for a moment to get some context. The Mayans were one of the biggest pre-Columbian civilizations living in the Americas. Until now, experts believe that, at its apex, the Mayan civilization consisted of over 40 cities with a population of millions of people. That's a lot of folks. Their civilization spanned Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, Guatemala, and Belize, and they survived mainly on agriculture. The thing is, the Yucatan Peninsula was an extremely difficult place to grow crops. So the Maya had to develop a complex irrigation system in most of their cities. They built a series of ceremonial buildings, pyramids, plazas, and even courts for playing ball. The Mayans might have been keen pyramid builders, but they also developed an advanced astronomical system. With whatever ancient technology they had, they were able to predict the exact location of planets, such as Venus and Mars, as well as the exact dates of eclipses. Now, let's take a look at some of their sites. This is Tikal. Located at the heart of the Guatemalan jungle, Tikal is believed to have been the capital of the ancient Mayan Empire. At its height, it was comparable in importance to such cities as London or New York in today's world. It is composed of a series of complex monuments. In total, the site has 12,000 buildings. The North Acropolis is Tikal's most ancient complex of monuments. Built solely by human hands around 350 BCE, it served as the resting place of kings and chiefs. Its monuments are up to 200 feet high. Back in the day, the step pyramid temples were painted a beautiful red. Mayans loved that color. Today, of course, you'll only see the limestone. We've said that the Mayans spread out through different countries, so it shouldn't come as a surprise that Chichen Itza is a 10-hour drive from Tikal today. There's no feud between the two, they were just different city centers, like New York and LA. It's got one of the best preserved pyramids on Earth to date. Located in Mexico's Yucatan state, this Mayan city is well over 1,500 years old. At its peak, it was home to 35,000 people. The site covers 4 square miles of land. The highlight is El Castilla, a tremendous step-like temple standing 80 feet above ground. Its most peculiar feature is that it has 91 steps up each of its 4 sides, including the upper platform, which makes for 365 steps, the same number of days as the solar year. Makes you go, Behold, the lost city of Palenque. Another important Maya city is believed to have hosted over 6,000 people at its peak. Archaeologists have made some unusual discoveries on this site. The most eccentric of them all makes us think of Indiana Jones and the Tomb Raider. One of the buildings in Palenque is believed to be the final resting place of the Red Queen of Palenque. She was believed to be the grandmother of the last Mayan king. In her honor, a huge monument was built to keep her body after her passing. The discovery of the tomb itself was already thrilling. Archaeologists found an ancient monument when digging at the site back in 1994. The first they saw was a room with a hidden door. Once they opened the door, they discovered an 8-foot-long corridor. At the end of this corridor was the queen's chamber, and inside was the mummy of the queen herself. They found her to be accompanied by her pearls, jade shells, and expensive rocks. But as the team explored the remains, they saw something strange. The room was filled with a red-colored powder. Researchers knew that the color red was important to the Mayan people, but they didn't understand why the queen was buried with this unknown substance. They took a sample back with them for further analysis and discovered that the red powder was cinnabar, a very dangerous mineral. This powder, when inhaled, can cause severe health damage to a person. The team concluded that this could only be a trap for anyone trying to steal her riches. Talk about curses, huh? One thing that has always troubled researchers is the lack of evidence on the decline of this almighty empire. What could have been the cause of their demise? Was it a drought? Some disease? New research in 2017 did shed some light on this issue. Using data from a site called Ciabal, located southwest of Tikal, scientists analyzed radiocarbon data from ceramics and archaeological excavations to extract new information about the unexpected passing of this great civilization. The information shows that instead of a sudden collapse, the Mayans most likely fell in waves of social instability and political crises. These events are believed to have deteriorated Mayan city centers and began causing the dispersion of the Mayan population. So, what's your take on the end of the story? Christmas, the season of lights, also has a dark side. Legend has it that Christmas Eve is a time for spirits to stroll the earth. Today, we'll look at scary monsters, mysterious entities, and more. The Yule lads, hailing from Iceland, make for quite a Christmas tradition. In contrast to the charming 7 dwarfs of Snow White, these 13 gnome-like trolls bring a touch of quirkiness to the holiday season. The Yule lads first made their literary debut in a 17th century poem. These playful youngsters, each with their own unique names and abilities, sprinkle a touch of mischief in the 13 days leading up to the grand Christmas celebration. Their cozy home is nestled in a mountain cave, where they reside with their interesting parents. The clan's father is a leisure master and prefers to hang out in the cave. Their mother is a giantess with an unusual craving for adventure. She seeks out mischievous children to join her in preparing a stew. Out of the troll kids, Spoonlicker, for instance, is known for his habit of thoroughly cleaning utensils with his tongue. Meanwhile, Door Slammer engages in door-slamming antics that might remind you of an angry teenager. As for Sausage Swiper, well, the clue is in the name. And let's not forget about the family's feline friend, who is also known as Yule. This furry companion is a giant black cat. It's on the lookout for folks. If it spots children without brand new clothes, the encounter won't end so well for the kids. Wow, that's harsh. The Nisi is a kind of creature that would send shivers down your spine. It's a diminutive bearded figure donning a sinister red cone-shaped hat. These malevolent beings enjoy lingering around farms. Their presence is unsettling as they claim to offer assistance with daily chores. But beware, for their demands are far from ordinary. In exchange for their eerie aid, they want a dread-inducing offering. Should you dare to deny this sinister request, they will unleash a reign of pure evil upon your existence. There's a nightmarish saga known as When the Nisi Got No Butter on His Christmas Porridge. Yeah, that's a real title. This tale revolves around a young girl who dares to tamper with Nisi's feast. She places the butter beneath the porridge, invoking his wrath. The horrifying consequences? He takes care of the farm's prized cow using his powers. Takes care, In Scandinavian folklore, many people know this creature as Tomten, too. Mary Lloyd is here to make you run for your life. It's New Year's Eve, and you're a young whelp. Suddenly, you hear some mysterious knocking at your door. As you swing it open, you're met with a spine-tingling sight. It's a tall, creepy figure wearing a long, flowing cloak with a horse's skull on its head. It's accompanied by a group of people who are chanting something in an eerie way. To make it even more unsettling, the horse skull has fake eyeballs in its eye holes, and its mouth is slightly open. This whole scene scares you so much that you can't even move. Not the vision of sugar plums you'd rather have. And then we have the Karakonkolos, hailing from the lands of Turkey and Bulgaria. Now picture a more sinister version of the elusive Bigfoot. The Karakonkolos lurks on street corners, posing riddles to passers-by. Answer correctly, and you may escape unharmed. But should you fail, you risk being plunged into a frigid slumber, even colder than the wintry night. In other corners of the world, the Karakonkolos revel in trickery, often masquerading as a familiar voice, tricking unsuspecting victims into venturing out into the snow. This eerie boogeyman is said to have originated from the Greek Kalakanzaros, its sinister influence echoing across the land. So, the Kalakanzari in Greece are a breed of goblins. For most of the year, they dwell underground, secretly plotting to bring about the apocalypse. However, when Advent arrives, they emerge into the human domain with sinister intent, sowing mischief and malevolence. These creatures are often described as dark, furry entities adorned with tusks and horns. They're male and curiously well endowed in their grotesque forms. Meet Frau Perkta, a character who comes from Germany and Austria. Now, she may go by different names, like Italian La Befana or Russian Babushka, but her modus operandi remains consistent. During the 12 delightful days of Christmas, she shifts between being a sweet, beautiful alpine goddess and a mischievous, some say mischievous, wrinkled hag, depending on your contact with her. She's quite the mood ring. If you've pleased her, you might just see a youthful presence. But if you get on her bad side, she's been known to perform a bit of DIY surgery. Frau Perkta is a remnant from Alpine paganism in the early Middle Ages. It's strongly associated with Berchtentag, also known as the Fest of the Epiphany, which happens on the 12th night after Christmas, on January 6th. As for her name, Perkta means bright one, a fitting moniker. Her look is complete with a knife concealed under her skirt. Careful sitting down. The next one is Krampus. His name is rooted in the German term Krampen, which means claw. It's a creature hailing from the eastern Alpine corners of Europe. Legend has it that Krampus takes it upon himself to playfully remind naughty children of the importance of good behavior on the evening of December 5. His methods are imaginative and way above having a chat with little humans. Meanwhile, his kind-hearted partner in holiday cheer, St. Nicholas, rewards well-behaved youngsters the next day during the joyful Feast of St. Nicholas. These traditions trace their roots as far back as the 6th century. Today, many European towns enthusiastically host Krampenslauf, or Krampus runs. People dress up as him at festivals. And for those with a penchant for sending unique holiday greetings, there's the holiday cards option. In an Alsatian legend, there's a story of Hans Trapp. No, not the Von Trapp family. Hans is a local figure known for his extreme greed and lack of moral principles. He resorted to practicing witchcraft and making pacts with evil forces in pursuit of wealth. He faced a dramatic downfall. He lost both his wealth and his place in society. To evade detection, he adopted the guise of a scarecrow and wandered the countryside. At a certain point, he became fixated on the idea of experiencing the taste of human flesh. Oh boy. God recognized that matters had spiraled out of control and struck Hans Trapp with a bolt of lightning. He met his end, yet there are accounts of his spectral return on Christmas. Belsnickel is a character of German folklore. It's traditionally known for its unique role in guiding children toward better behavior, offering an intriguing contrast to the jolly figure of St. Nicholas. The term Belsnickel can be traced back to the fusion of Bells, an older German term signifying fur, and nickel as a nod to St. Nicholas. Belsnickel is known for his visits to children, during which he engages them in friendly conversations and playful inquiries. Based on their responses, he may opt to reward them with a gift or employ a form of discipline, often involving a wooden rod. Belsnickel's origins can be traced back to the Middle Ages. The final touch is Grilla. She is a giantess who is able to sense children misbehaving all year round. She keeps a record of those children and sees them as snacks during Christmas time. Wait a minute, didn't we mention her before? If you ask this question, you're an attentive, devoted Brightsider. We have indeed mentioned her, the mother of the Yule lads. Remember that crowded family with a black cat? Now, Pierre Fouettard was a butcher. He was known for his involvement in the cases of abduction and robbery, leading to tragic fates for children. St. Nicholas uncovered his gruesome acts and miraculously revived the children. In retribution, Pierre Fouettard was sentenced to a lifetime of servitude, accompanying St. Nicholas and managing wayward youngsters. Well, thanks anyways, but I think I'll just stick with Santa Claus. Oh, and the reindeer.
In 1975, in Puerto Rico, a farmer saw most of his goats lying lifeless on the ground. He got closer and saw that the animals were stiff and had 2 puncture marks on their necks. Goats were not the only animals that were hurt. Many pigs, cows, and geese lost their lives too. They all had the same distinctive bite marks on their necks, and all had been drained of their vital fluids. The locals immediately jumped to conclusions and blamed dogs, and the authorities didn't bother to do a better investigation and just said dogs had done it without looking for any proof. A couple of days later, though, many more animals were found deceased. Among them was a cow that had literally been opened, and it had a lot of scratches on its head. The farmer next door reported that his chickens had been destroyed by something. In just a few weeks, the creature took the lives of 90 farm animals. After some time, another farmer said that 10 of his goats had been drained, 7 had been hurt, and 11 were missing. This time, the authorities didn't waste any time and started the monster hunt, but they had no luck finding the culprit. The incident was all over the local newspaper, and the beast was named the Vampire of Machu. The incident caught the attention of the Agricultural Commission, and scientist Juan Rivera was tasked to solve this otherworldly mystery. His first suspect was a Puerto Rican boa. This non-venomous snake can grow to be a little over 6 feet. Still, its diet consists of only small prey. It's also very shy of humans and other animals. It avoids bigger creatures at all costs. You're more likely to see fish climbing trees than this boa taking down a whole cow. Near the crime scene, a large cave was discovered, and we all know that weird creatures like living in dark, cold caves. In the cave, they found some crazy-looking bats. As we've seen in movies, bats can turn into vampires, so they must be the culprit. But no, bats were as innocent as they could be. Their favorite food wasn't cows or goats, it was figs. They were peaceful fruit-eating bats that didn't care about animals. Again, the researcher hit a wall. Suddenly, all the terror stopped in July 1975. It seemed like the creature had vanished into thin air, but not for long. 2 decades later, 62 miles from the previous site, more animals were found. A local vet examined them. He was terrified to discover that every animal had 2 precisely cut holes like he had never seen before. The animals were anemic and looked like they'd passed away recently. By the looks of it, the creature's favorite food was goats, and that's how it got the infamous name we all heard of, Chupacabra, which means the goat sucker. Dogs, chickens, rabbits, and other animals were not off the menu. In short time, the Chupacabra took 1,000 farm animals. Now, this animal had a name, but people still had zero idea about what the Chupacabra looked like, which was terrifying. In Canovanas, Madeline and her mother reported seeing a weird creature that could have been the Chupacabra. They said it had been walking on 2 legs like a human and resembled a kangaroo. They mentioned that the monster also had spikes on the back, no ears, large dark eyes, and 2 holes for a nose. It had 2 arms with 3 fingers. The Chupacabra seemed to like Madeline's house because her husband and his coworker found it in the garage. They tried to capture it, but didn't succeed. Madeline later drew a detailed sketch of it. Many people saw the sketch and reported seeing a similar creature. They claimed it had strong legs and wings and smelled like sulfur. Take all these descriptions with a grain of salt. If they'd been true, they would have been all over the news. But still, keep in mind these descriptions. They will be important later in the story. In 1976, on some talk show, they talked about the Chupacabra, and the show quickly went viral. Soon, people started reporting having seen a similar creature in Florida and Mexico. Many said that the stories were like a unicorn rodeo. They were totally made up. In Mexico, 2 skeptical inquiries, Patricia and Mario, laid traps around those farms where the Chupacabra had allegedly been seen. They caught some animals in their traps, but no sign of the goat sucker. They only captured wild dogs. The police stated that the Chupacabra was just a wild dog, not a mythical creature. And still, in the next 5 years, there were numerous sightings of the Chupacabra worldwide. On the 13th of August of the year 2000, a farmer from Nicaragua found 25 of his sheep and 35 of his neighbor's sheep hurt. So he decided to take the matter into his own hands. One night, he was patiently waiting in the pitch-black night for the creature to appear. Suddenly, from the corner of his eye, he saw something and managed to hit it. The creature passed away. Finally, they had proof that the Chupacabra was not just a fairy tale. It was a big thing. Later, the Chupacabra was examined by a vet. The vet was shocked because he had no idea what the creature was. Remember Madeline's description? Well, the vet described the animal differently, but his story turned out to be more plausible. This Chupacabra had large teeth, giant claws, greenish eyes, bat-like skin, and a crest sticking out of its back. The vet concluded that the animal was some kind of hybrid. They thought it was a cross between a wolf and a crocodile, but it sounds like an exaggeration and is hard to believe. We all know that such a mix is impossible. They did some tests on the body at the university in Nicaragua, and the results didn't quite deliver what they had expected. The animal was a wild dog with mange. Mange is an itchy skin disease that causes dogs to lose their hair. It's also highly contagious. When a dog has mange, their skin becomes scaly and wrinkled. When they returned the body, the farmer noticed it wasn't his Chupacabra. 7 years later, another body was found in Texas. Phyllis Cannon returned to her farm and noticed that some of her chickens had passed away. All seemed to be anemic. Later, she saw coyote-looking creatures that didn't have any hair. More of her animals were harmed, so she had to set up cameras on her farm. But unfortunately, like always, she didn't manage to record anything. Surprisingly, she got a call from a local farmer who had found the Chupacabra hit by a car. Later, another body was found much closer to her farm. She took some pictures of the animal, and soon, those images were all over the internet. Phyllis was curious and sent 5 DNA samples to 5 different universities. The results didn't match any animal in the archives. Researchers had no idea what it was, but it wasn't a dog. Phyllis still has one animal in her freezer and a taxidermied specimen in her house. There are many theories about the Chupacabra. Some claim that the animal is a genetically modified monkey that escaped the lab. Others state that it's some mysterious, otherworldly creature. The most consistent hypothesis is that the Chupacabra is a mix between a Mexican wolf and a coyote with mange. Now, do you remember that Phyllis said that she had sent samples to 5 universities and no match had been found? Well, it turned out she hadn't been telling the truth. At one university, they found that the animal was a mix between a coyote and a Mexican wolf and that it had mange. Animals with mange are weak and will likely try to hunt farm animals to survive. People, when they see something they don't know, tend to exaggerate, which is why all witnesses describe the animal differently. You know how it goes. As the years pass, common knowledge slips away faster than you can say, "What's that thingamajig for?" Just think. Our grandkids will probably be scratching their heads over the buttons on our old school phones. So it's no wonder that some ancient artifacts have got us all stumped too. Take a look at this funky object. Any guesses on what it is? A musical instrument, a toy, or maybe something out of this world? Beats me, and even the experts have no exact answer. This little guy is a Roman dodecahedron, discovered by some amateur archaeologists near Lincoln, England. It's shaped like a fist and made of a mix of metals. Now, as for what this thingy was used for, that's the million-dollar question. Supposedly, these guys were all the rage back in the day in northern Gaul and Roman Germany. According to some ancient maps, similar dodecahedrons have turned up in Europe, Britain, and even along the maritime Silk Road in Southeast Asia. The plot thickens as more and more of these dodecahedrons pop up. Some had wax inside, leading scientists to think they were candle holders. Others think they might have been used for knitting gloves, since none have been found in warmer regions. There's even one found in Geneva with zodiac signs etched on it, sparking some woo-woo theories about fortune-telling. And now a fresh discovery has got everyone's head spinning. Could this be some kind of sacred tool for the Romans? Who knows? Maybe it's the first multi-tool ever, invented way before Swiss Army knives were a thing. Carved stone balls from Scotland are another historical mystery. They most likely date back to the late Neolithic period and come in various types, from sandstone to granite. They're all roughly the same size and have intricate, evenly spaced patterns of circular bosses or knobs. Most of these designs have 6 bosses, but the number can range from 3 to 160. Some of these balls are more skillfully crafted than others, and a few even have extra decorations. There are over 400 carved stone balls and mostly found in Scotland, although some have turned up in northern England and Ireland. These stone balls rarely show signs of damage or use, and there are no clues that would give away their function. Most experts think they weren't practical tools, but had some symbolic or social importance, probably a sign of power or prestige within their communities. The Folkton drums are the 3 stone cylinders from Neolithic Britain, discovered in the late 19th century in a burial mound in East Yorkshire. Nothing similar has been found anywhere else in the British Isles from any prehistoric period. Each drum is decorated with unique designs covering the sides and domed tops. The decorations are mostly geometric, arranged in panels with stylized human faces peeking out from 2 of the drums. Recent studies of the artifacts using new technologies show that the designs had been carved and recarved over time. A team of experts also analyzed the composition of the drums, and it turns out that they were made from local chalk. In the late Bronze Age in Europe, long before coins became common, finely crafted metal objects served as portable wealth and symbols of high status. Across Europe, archaeologists have found all sorts of artifacts, from gold adornments worn by elites to large bronze cauldrons used in feasts. Beautifully decorated gold rings discovered in Wales are among these items. They're known as lock rings and may have been used to hold hair. Now they're flattened after spending nearly 3,000 years underground. They used to have cone-shaped openings at each end. They were found at different times, but were likely worn as a pair and buried together in a single hoard. Other Roman artifacts made of the copper alloy were first catalogued as lunate pendants. But during a recent re-examination, experts found that these items were actually small mortar and pestle sets, known as cosmetic grinders. They were used to grind minerals for makeup and were specifically designed for applying liner and shadows to the eyes. They were mistaken for pendants because of suspension loops that allowed them to be carried on a cord. These cosmetic sets from the 1st century of the current era were unique to Britain. They prove the influence of imported cosmetics and beauty trends from the Mediterranean and Roman provinces, including Egypt. The Salzburg Cube, also known as the Wolf's Egg Iron, was discovered in the late 19th century in Austria. It doesn't really look like a cube, but is more like a rounded object with 2 flat sides. Down the middle, it has a groove, and the surface is covered with pits and craters. Workers accidentally found this artifact when they blew apart a piece of coal. The coal seam it came from is thought to be over 60 million years old. The Salzburg Cube moved between museums, mysteriously vanished in the early 20th century, and then showed up again. Some researchers thought it must be a Victorian-era candlestick holder, but still, no one knows the true story of the cube or its current location. Archaeologists have unearthed an incredible historical find in Pakistan, an ancient sphinx estimated to be around 12,500 years old. The region where it was found was once a busy center of the ancient Indus Valley civilization. It had advanced urban planning, intricate art, and sophisticated drainage systems. The discovery of the ancient Sphinx is a good example of their progressive art. We all know of the Great Sphinx of Giza, but what was the significance of the Sphinx in the Indus Valley culture? Their Sphinx has designs and carvings that show scenes with their daily activities, which means it may have had a more complex role than a symbol of power or guardian. It could stand for a balance between humans and nature, or even a deity associated with agriculture. Aroca in Chile sits on the sandy dunes of the Atacama Desert, known as the driest desert in the world. Long before this coastal town was built in the 16th century, the Chinchorro people called this region their home. Archaeologists found hundreds of their mummies. Radiocarbon dating showed that these mummies are over 7,000 years old, which makes them 2,000 years older than the famous Egyptian mummies. The Cinchoro used special techniques to preserve the mummies, not just relying on the dry climate for that. And unlike the Egyptians, they didn't just do it for the elite members of their society, but for everyone, no matter what age or status they had. The local people living in Aruca now are so used to finding mummies in their backyards that they don't feel weird about living among them. In the winter of 1850, a powerful storm with extra high tides hit the west coast of Orkney, Scotland. The wind and waves ripped away the surf, covering a mound, and revealed stone-built structures beneath. A local antiquarian decided to dig up the village that he thought was from the Iron Age. He managed to unearth the remains of 4 houses and many artifacts from 2 villages. The villages had been buried under sand, so everything was really well preserved. Carbon dating wasn't a thing back then yet, so it was tricky to tell the exact age of the villages. Almost a century later, with new tech, researchers were finally able to tell that the place was actually from Neolithic times. You can still see stone dressers and box beds in the prehistoric houses. Archaeologists and historians working on the famous Terracotta Army think that it might have been inspired by or modeled on ancient Greek sculptures. It would mean there was a cultural contact between East and West much earlier than we thought, long before the Silk Road trade route. There was probably Western influence in China during the era of its first emperor, who took the throne in 246 before the current era. Before that time, China didn't have a tradition of building life-sized sculptures. Earlier terracotta soldiers were much smaller, less than 10 inches tall. Greek artists might have even been present to train Chinese sculptors. Strange and amazing items are discovered often, but figuring out what our ancestors were up to is pretty tough. Especially when all you have are just some rusty cups and cave drawings. It's no surprise that even the experts in lab coats sometimes make mistakes. But it's not just about dusty plates and huge stones. Sometimes there's even humans with large heads. So grab your digging tools and let's travel back to ancient times to explore incredible societies that even scientists can't fully explain. Sardinia may look idyllic now, but I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't fancy visiting it 3,000 years ago. Rumor has it, terrible giants roamed around this island back then. People even talk about finding human skeletons over 13 feet tall there, although nobody's ever shown anything to prove it. But the stories will make you wonder because some weird stuff has definitely happened. In 1974, over 5,000 pieces of broken stone artifacts were found in a part of the island called Monte Prama, but instead of being displayed in a museum, they were locked up in an underground vault for about 30 years. Sounds a bit suspicious, doesn't it? When they were finally displaced in 2005, scientists put the pieces together to find statues of 38 giant men standing 8 feet tall. Not quite as tall as the legendary skeletons, but still pretty huge. It's thought these statues were made by the Nuragic people, who lived on the island a long time ago. Besides giant statues, they also built over 8,000 massive stone buildings. Perhaps Nuragic weren't giants themselves, but they definitely liked their things big. I do too. I like a big number of likes on our videos. That'd be pretty great. Thank you if you liked this and subscribed. Now back to the video. You and I are pretty smart, but we might not be the smartest humans ever. Actually, we might not even be the smartest species. Since 1913, some skull fossils found in South Africa have hinted at a possibly smarter contender called Boskop man. This human-like species might have lived as recently as 10,000 years ago. Their skull suggests they had really big heads, which means their brains could have been 30% bigger than ours. Wow! Their average IQ could have been around 149, making them among the smartest 0.05% of people today. But if a Boskop brainiac was so much smarter, why are they not around and we are? Well, bigger isn't always better, you know. Our brains are a lot bigger than our ape relatives, mainly in the prefrontal cortex. This part helps with high-level tasks like making decisions, remembering things short-term, and being aware of ourselves. The parts of the brain that handle our senses and movements haven't really grown much.
So, maybe the Boskop spent too much time dwelling on the past rather than doing practical things like hunting. But this is all just guessing. We really don't know what happened to these clever cousins of ours. Some people even argue that Boskops weren't any different from us, with the only evidence being parts of skulls. The jungle is huge. Did you know the Amazon rainforest is home to about 30% of all the world's plant and animal species? That's impressive. However, the history of one native species, humans, has long puzzled scientists. The mysterious Cahokia people lived here for hundreds of years and then vanished around 1400 AD. People thought the Amazon only had a few scattered tribes, but recently we discovered big, unusual shapes in the ground called geoglyphs. These might look like simple shallow ditches, but they're actually the remains of a vast civilization that spread over 5,000 square miles and includes about 450 markings, some as wide as 1,300 feet. That's insane! They likely contained ceremonial buildings and could have hosted up to 1 million people as recently as 550 years ago. Thanks to new technology like LiDAR, which uses a safe laser to map the forest without harming it, we can explore deeper. In 2019, some scans showed miles of raised roads and pathways and even pyramids over 70 feet tall. They found 26 separate settlements, 2 of which were at least 250 acres each. Damn, that's like 330 soccer fields. It's not certain what happened to the Cahokia people. Maybe European conquistadors drove them out. Maybe the most baffling ancient civilization is one we've never actually found a trace of. Yep, I'm talking about Atlantis, the grand city that supposedly sank into the ocean. The first mentions of Atlantis come from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who talked about a great city near the Strait of Gibraltar. But for ages, everyone just thought Plato made up Atlantis as a perfect version of his own Athens. So why, about 12,000 years after it supposedly vanished, do we still wonder if it might be real? Well, in the 19th century, U.S. Congressman Ignatius Donnelly wrote a book giving 13 reasons why he thought Atlantis was more than just a myth. Then, in 1965, some folks thought they actually found Atlantis when they discovered the Richat structure, a massive 25-mile-wide dome in Mauritania, Africa. It's so big that you can see the whole thing from space. 2 astronauts flying over the Sahara Desert spotted this giant eye staring back at them and thought they'd made the discovery of a lifetime. Unfortunately, there's no solid evidence linking this structure to Atlantis. It's believed to have formed from volcanic activity about 100 million years ago. But it does look suspicious, doesn't it? Still, we're no closer to knowing the truth. Imagine going back to about 3,300 BCE and finding yourself in South Asia. Welcome to the Harappan civilization. These people were way ahead of their time. They had cities like Harappa and Mohenjo Daro, complete with baked brick houses, sophisticated drainage systems, and even public baths. This place might have had over 5 million people, making it one of the densest regions at the time. They also invented a system of standardized weights that was incredibly useful for traders. And trading they did. These people had connections stretching all the way to the Middle East, thanks to their great skills in metallurgy. They even had a form of ancient branding. The seals were used to stamp clay on trade goods. Despite being so advanced with a thriving urban life, there's a whole bunch of mystery shrouding their language and script. We've got bits and pieces of their writing, but no one's deciphered them yet, even with all the technology we have today. We also still don't know how exactly their society worked. It looks like they didn't flaunt their social status as much as other civilizations. No grand palaces or massive monuments. Instead, their largest buildings might have been granaries. They sure were practical. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. Around 1800 BCE, this bustling civilization started to decline, possibly due to shifts in river patterns. As the environment changed, the Harappans packed up, moving towards more hospitable lands. Ever heard of the Minotaur? the beast with a bull's head and a man's body, hunting the bravest travelers in a massive maze. Well, this wasn't just any old tale. It was one of the most popular dramas of the ancient world, and it was inspired by this place, the island of Crete. The Minoans lived here during the Bronze Age. They had stunning palaces, amazing frescoes, and a culture so rich it still fascinates historians to this day. They built places like Knossos, which was so complex with its multi-story buildings and elaborate hallways that it might have inspired the whole labyrinth myth. Their engineering was so ahead of its time that even their drainage systems were more advanced than what many of us have today. Let me know in the comments which of these stories you find the most fascinating, and thanks for watching.
You're walking down the street. You see a strange-looking antique shop called Ageless Trinkets of Mr. Bright. You're curious, so you enter there. You take a look at all the weird stuff. Suddenly, an old folded parchment paper catches your attention. It's a world map, but something's off with it. Instead of showing the countries as you know them, it shows the locations of 4 mythical lost worlds and civilizations. Mr. Bright, the shop owner, comes next to you after realizing your shock. This map won't let you find these places or anything, but I can explain to you the legends behind them if you want, he says. Let me begin with Atlantis. You might know it as Aquaman's underwater kingdom, but Atlantis, the fictional island, was actually first introduced in 2 of Plato's works. According to him, Atlantis was a highly advanced civilization that existed about 9,000 years before his own time, and its story had been passed down by poets, authors, and others. He wrote about Atlantis and its citizens to give a moral lesson and to teach about the dangers of arrogance, as well as the eventual downfall of those who are after too much power. In his dialogues, Plato stated that Atlantis was a great and powerful empire that was respected in all parts of the world. It was founded by beings who were half deities and half human, and became a great naval power after a while. Being an island filled with gold, silver, and other precious metals certainly helped their case. But besides that, it was also known for its breathtaking architecture and state-of-the-art technology, as well as its countless rare and exotic wild animals. Atlanteans were proud of their great achievements and the perfection of their civilization, but their excessive pride was going to bring their downfall. They believed they were so superior that they could gain control over any nation. This led them to launch a series of invasions. They conquered many of the Mediterranean lands, but when it was time to enter Athens, Athenians pushed back with an extraordinary force, so the Atlanteans were finally defeated. Plato stated that deities then got angry at Atlanteans because of how wicked, greedy, and immoral they became. So they punished them by sending earthquakes, which caused Atlantis to sink beneath the sea. Although the earliest written records of Atlantis were Plato's works, some people still believed his story to be based on truth and tried to identify the island of Atlantis with actual countries. Some people suggested it may have been located in the Mediterranean Sea, near the coast of Spain or Italy. Others thought it may have been located in the Caribbean, off the coast of Central or South America, but there was no solid evidence to support any of these claims. One theory, in particular, seemed more plausible than the others, though. Located in the Aegean Sea, the island of Santorini was the home of a highly advanced Minoan society. However, due to a huge volcanic eruption, it was destroyed about 3,600 years ago, causing the Minoan civilization to suddenly disappear. These similarities between the fictional Atlanteans and the historical Minoans made Santorini a good candidate for the speculations. Yet again, there were still major flaws with it, such as how the time when Plato said Atlantis was destroyed doesn't coincide with the time of Santorini's eruption. So Atlantis still continues to be regarded as nothing more than a popular legend in the scientific world. Now, let's move toward the northeast direction on the map, Mr. Bright says. According to Celtic Breton mythology, there once was a magnificent city called Ys, also known as Caris. that towered over Douarnenez Bay in France's Brittany region. It was the most wealthy city in the entire Atlantic. It was especially famous for its beautiful gardens and buildings, and its citizens were all living comfortably and happily there. Dahut, who was King Bradlon's daughter in Breton legends and literature, had a deep love for the sea. She begged her father to build a city at the edge of the sea, and that is how the city of Ys was established. Little did she know that she would be the one responsible for the destruction of her father's beloved gift. You see, since the city was surrounded by the sea, it needed to be protected by a dike equipped with floodgates, and these gates could only be opened at low tide. And the only one who had the keys to these gates was the king himself. One day, a handsome red knight arrived at the city, but couldn't pass the gates. Dahut was so taken by him that she wanted to let him in. She knew that her father was the keeper of the only key to the city, so she sneaked into his room and stole it from him. Then she gave it to the Red Knight so that he could enter the city and they could be together. However, the Red Knight turned out to be the Prince of Darkness, and he intentionally left the gate open to the raging sea. The waves soon swallowed all of Ys. King Gradlon was able to escape on his magical horse, but Dahut couldn't. She turned into an evil mermaid who lured sailors into the sea. Today, if you go to Quimper, a city in Brittany, northwest France, you can find the statue of King Gradlon riding on his horse. Although the city of Ys is a legend, Brittany coast locals believe that on the days when the waters are calm, you can still hear the tolls of the city bells deep under the sea, if you listen carefully. Mr. Bright then points at the Indian Ocean on the map and says, "Now, have you heard about Lemuria?" Back in the mid-1800s, a few scientists suggested that there was once a continent that existed in the Indian Ocean, somewhere close to the south of modern-day Sri Lanka. The first one to popularize this theory was the British lawyer and zoologist Philip Lutley Sclater. In his paper, The Mammals of Madagascar, he stated that he found lemur fossils in India, and not in Africa. However, this discovery was extremely shocking to him because of the fact that lemurs' original homeland, Madagascar, is much closer to Africa. He proposed that this was possible only if some larger continent connected the two once. He stated that this continent must have eventually sunk to the ocean floor. He then named it Lemuria, and hence the theory was born. People who came after Sclater took his theory a step further and thought that Lemuria was also the home of an extinct race of humans called Lemurians, who had 4 arms and enormous bodies, and were also the ancestors of modern-day humans, as well as lemurs. Of course, as new scientific discoveries were made on plate tectonics, evolution, and the study of DNA, the theories regarding the fictional continent called Lemuria were debunked. The last fictional land on the map is Agartha, Mr. Bright says. Taking its roots from Eastern mysticism, one legend says there's a kingdom called Agartha that is located deep beneath the surface of the earth. It's where all 4 corners of the world are connected by paths and tunnels. It is said that there's a secret entrance into Agartha hidden in the Gobi Desert, and it's built by Agarthans themselves using advanced technology that can't be detected by us, the surface folks. According to some beliefs, Agartha exists to counterbalance the energies of those who live above the surface. While we live in a state of rush and heightened emotions, this world beneath us is the total opposite. Some even say that those who escaped Atlantis fled here to continue their lives inside the Earth's core. And yet, others think it's actually a land that's crawling with all kinds of monsters. But there's no need to be scared, since modern science proved Earth's core is not actually hollow and is a solid hot iron ball. So you can cancel your journey plans to the center of the Earth if you've made any. Thanks, Mr.